I'd been on the force for nearly 10 years, but nothing. Not chasing drunks on icy roads, not wrestling with drifters who shouldn't have been anywhere near town, had prepared me for the first time I walked the cemetery after midnight. The night air was thick and damp, clinging to my skin like wet cloth, and the fog had settled low over the ground, curling around the gravestones like smoke from some unseen fire. My flashlight cut a narrow path through the mist, the beam trembling slightly in my grip as if it had its own unease. The gates of the cemetery groaned when I pushed them open. The sound didn't echo. It swallowed itself as if the darkness absorbed everything. I stepped inside, boots sinking slightly in the soft earth, and the smell hit me immediately. Damp soil, decaying leaves, and something else I couldn't name. Something sharp and bitter like iron and rot mixed together. I swallowed hard and tried to shake off the sense of wrongness pressing in from all sides. I'd come for a routine patrol. That's what the sheriff before me had always called it. A walk through the graveyard to check for trespassers, vandals, or drifters looking for a place to sleep. It sounded simple enough in the daylight, but at night the place felt alive in ways that had nothing to do with people. The first few gravestones were ordinary, weathered marble with names worn smooth, some of them from families long gone. I crouched once or twice to read a date, trying to anchor myself in something familiar, but the fog seemed to press in closer with every step I took. It wasn't just fog, though. The shadows around the stones didn't behave normally. I could feel them watching me, stretching too long, folding over themselves, twitching in ways that no shadow should. I blinked, telling myself I was seeing things. My heart hammered like a drum, and I thought about turning back. But something made me keep going, like a pull I couldn't resist, a curiosity I didn't trust. I remember passing the old family plots, the ones with wrought iron fences curling like claws, and feeling a chill that went deeper than the night air. The metal was cold to the touch, and when I ran my hand over the spikes, it felt almost wet. Not rain or dew, wet, like something had just brushed against it, lingering there. I jerked my hand back, forcing a laugh that didn't reach my eyes. I was alone, I told myself. Just alone. I walked past row after row, names blurred by time, and I began to notice a pattern, or maybe it was only my mind straining to find one. The shadows weren't random. They were gathering, shifting, pooling in the corners where the flashlight didn't reach. I tried to focus on the sound of my boots, the crunch of leaves underfoot. But even that sounded hollow, as if the earth beneath me wasn't holding the sound the way it should. There was no echo, no response from the world around me, and that absence, more than anything, made me shiver. Then I thought I heard a sigh. Soft, almost imperceptible, like someone exhaling behind me. I froze, scanning the fog, straining my ears. Nothing. Just the wind, or maybe my imagination. I forced myself to take a few more steps, telling myself that patrols were routine, that this was just another night. But the more I walked, the heavier the air became. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. I cursed under my breath. Batteries were fine. Nothing should have been wrong with the light. By the time I reached the oldest section of the cemetery, the one that hadn't seen visitors in decades, my nerves were raw. The stones here were jagged, unkempt, leaning at angles that defied reason. Some had sunk deep into the earth, tilting as if trying to escape the ground itself. I felt like I was stepping through time into a place the living weren't meant to enter, and then I saw it. At first, it was just a shape, half hidden by fog. I thought maybe it was a tree or a tilted tombstone, but it moved just slightly and my stomach dropped. My pulse hit my throat. The movement was too fluid, too deliberate to be a trick of the wind. My mind raced trying to explain it. Could be a deer. Could be a stray dog. Could be someone hiding. I whispered into the night. Hello? My voice felt loud, clumsy, like a shout in a cathedral. The sound of it startled me. There was no reply, nothing. The fog swallowed my words before they reached anyone or anything. And yet, I had the distinct feeling that I was being watched, studied, as though the cemetery itself had turned its attention to me. I forced my legs to move forward, each step deliberate. The closer I got, the more I felt the shadows shift. They weren't on the ground anymore. They were rising, stretching toward me from the corners of the stones. I could almost sense them reaching, not like hands, not exactly, but with intent. My flashlight beam trembled, and for a moment, the thing, whatever it was, vanished, swallowed by the fog. I breathed, slow and steady, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I've chased people through dark alleys, been trapped in burning buildings, wrestled men twice my size, but this was something else. Fear seeped into my bones, cold and persistent. I couldn't run. I couldn't turn back. Something in me was anchored here, tied to the ground, forced to keep moving. I remember pausing near a row of graves, leaning against one of the leaning stones. My hand brushed the cold marble, and I felt an itch at the edge of my mind, a whispering that wasn't sound, yet somehow felt like it was crawling through my skull. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to block it, and when I opened them, the fog had shifted again. Shapes loomed where none had been before. My flashlight flickered once more, revealing nothing, then everything. I could feel the history here, the weight of it, pressing down like wet concrete. Names, dates, stories, long dead. They all crowded my vision and my mind, bleeding through the night. And in that weight, I felt something else. A presence, patient, watching, waiting. I told myself I was overthinking, that patrols were supposed to be routine. But nothing about that night was routine. Every step I took made the ground groan under me, each grave like it had a story it wanted to tell. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the perimeter, the fences, the paths I was supposed to walk. But the further I went, the more wrong it all felt. The fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the flashlight's beam. The shadows became solid, almost tangible, curling around me without touching me, as though aware of where I stood and what I feared. At one point, I thought I heard my own name, soft, hushed, drawn out like a breath from under the earth. I spun around. Nothing. The fog rolled lazily between the tombstones, carrying no shape, no figure, no sound beyond the faint crunch of my boots. I told myself I was hearing things. I told myself I was alone. But the feeling lingered, a pressure on my chest, a weight behind my eyes. I kept walking, step by step, slow and deliberate. The cemetery stretched on, endless and unwelcoming. My flashlight illuminated names that didn't belong, names that should not exist in this town on these stones. I blinked. The fog shifted again. My stomach churned. I felt like I had walked into someone else's dream, or maybe their nightmare, and I wasn't meant to leave. Eventually, I reached the edge of the cemetery, the far end where the fog began to thin and the trees opened to the moonlit fields beyond. Relief should have hit me, but it didn't. I felt hollow, as if some piece of me had stayed behind, trapped in that fog, left with the watching shadows and the whispers I hadn't heard yet. My legs ached, my lungs burned, and my hands trembled around the flashlight. But I forced myself out of the cemetery, back into the open air. I don't know how long I stood there, outside the gates, breathing the cold, empty night. The fog behind me swirled lazily over the graves, hiding whatever had watched me so closely, waiting in silence. I told myself it was over, that this patrol had ended, that tomorrow I'd laugh about it, shake it off as nerves or imagination. But deep down I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it still, watching, patient, waiting for me to return, and I would. Because once the cemetery knows you, it never lets you go. I didn't sleep much after my first midnight patrol. Even with the sun rising, cutting through the haze of the morning, I could still feel the weight of the cemetery pressing on me, the fog lingering behind my eyelids. It wasn't just the shapes, the leaning stones, or the unnatural shadows. It was something else. Something I couldn't name but felt crawling under my skin. By the time night fell again, I found myself back at the edge of the cemetery, flashlight in hand, keys jingling in my pocket. I kept telling myself it was curiosity, that I needed to check the grounds, make sure there was nothing dangerous, nothing illegal. But the truth was simpler and darker. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about them. The shadows, the sense of being watched. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. The same sound as before, but somehow different. Quieter and heavier, like the cemetery itself was holding its breath. I paused, hands gripping the flashlight, and listened. At first there was nothing, just the wind stirring the dry leaves, the occasional scuttle of some nocturnal animal. But then I heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible, like the brush of fabric across skin, the softest sound of voices in the distance. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I told myself it was the wind, maybe the rustling of trees, but the voices, they weren't random. I thought I could make out words, fragments at first, then clearer, my name, whispered over and over, as if someone or something was repeating it from far away. Sheriff. I spun around, swinging the flashlight. The beam cut through the fog in a narrow cone, illuminating gravestones, statues, iron fences, but nothing alive. Nothing at all. Just the cold marble and the creeping mist. My voice came out shaky when I called back. Who's there? No answer. Only the whispers, soft and patient, weaving around the stones, echoing in my head. I took a step forward, then another, the sound of my boots muted by the heavy earth. The whispers shifted with me, always just out of reach, curling around the edges of my vision. I realized then that they weren't coming from one place. They were everywhere. Coming from the ground, from the air, from the stones themselves. I tried to focus on something tangible. A fence post, a broken headstone, the outline of a tree. But my eyes kept catching movement where there was none. Shadows twitching, fog curling in unnatural patterns, shapes shifting just beyond the flashlight's reach. The whispers followed me, growing, stretching into words that didn't belong. Syllables that made no sense but felt ancient, familiar, like a language my brain almost remembered. And then I heard a name that made my stomach drop. Daniel. My real name. My voice caught in my throat. I froze, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The whispers paused, then started again, slow and deliberate, dragging the syllables out as though savoring them. Daniel. I stepped forward, compelled, and my boots sank slightly into the soft soil. The fog pressed against my legs, cold and wet, curling around me like fingers. I felt like I was sinking, slowly, inch by inch, into the earth itself. And the whispers followed, a choir of voices, none of them human, all of them patient. Calling my name, calling for me, calling from the depths of the graves themselves, I forced myself to move. Forward, past the old section, past the stones that had sunk unevenly into the soil. Each step was heavy, deliberate, and each step seemed to answer the whispers, making them louder, closer. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the wind. Maybe it was the acoustics of the cemetery at night. Maybe I was imagining it. My nerves frayed from the first patrol, but my gut told me otherwise. Something unnatural was here, and it was speaking to me. I reached a small cluster of graves older than anything else around. The names were long faded, barely legible. Moss had claimed most of the stone surfaces, curling over them in green patterns that looked almost like veins. I leaned down, flashlight illuminating the closest headstone, and that's when I felt it. A vibration under my hand, subtle at first, then stronger. Like the heartbeat of the earth itself, the whispers intensified. Not one voice now, but many. Overlapping, rising and falling, speaking words I couldn't understand. Yet even without comprehension, I felt their meaning. They weren't angry. Not exactly. They were expectant, patient, waiting, calling. I stumbled back, my breath coming fast, uneven. I swung the flashlight again, trying to catch the source. Nothing. But the fog shifted, and in that movement I saw shapes, figures, maybe shadows of people, maybe only tricks of the light. They moved at the edge of the beam, lingering, vanishing when I looked directly at them. Daniel, the name again. I felt my knees weaken. My flashlight shook in my hand. The voices weren't just around me. They were in me, filling my head, wrapping around my thoughts, pulling at memories I hadn't thought about in years. My mother's lullaby, my father's sharp voice, the old church bells down the street, all twisted, all distorted, carried by these whispers from nowhere and everywhere at once. I wanted to leave. I knew I should run, leave the cemetery, never come back, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was anchored, tethered by some unseen thread to the oldest graves, to the whispers that called my name. Daniel, come closer. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was sensation. like fingers brushing against my mind, tugging at memories, fears, regrets. I felt my childhood self in that moment, small and afraid, standing in the dark hallway of our old house, listening to noises that weren't there. And now, years later, I was back there, in the dark, in the cemetery, feeling that same helplessness, multiplied 100 times. I forced myself to take a step forward, another. The whispers parted around me, guiding, coaxing. And then I saw it. Not a figure, not exactly, but a faint glow emanating from the fog between two graves. I couldn't tell what it was. Candlelight? A reflection? Something else entirely. My flashlight flickered as I stepped closer, and for a moment, the whispers paused. Silence fell like a shroud, thick and heavy. Then a single voice spoke, clear and deliberate, right in my ear. "Daniel." I spun around. Empty fog, empty stones, nothing but mist and the faint smell of wet earth. My heart pounded, each beat deafening in the quiet. I realized then that the whispers hadn't stopped. They had only changed. They were inside my head now, not coming from outside. And they would not leave. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and uneven ground, landing hard against a gravestone. My flashlight skittered across the dirt, casting long, wavering shadows across the stones. And I saw it, just for a second. A figure, tall, indistinct, leaning slightly as if it had no bones, only the shape of a person watching me. Then it vanished, absorbed by the fog, leaving nothing but the whispering voices, now a low hum vibrating in my skull. I forced myself to stand. My legs shook, my breath ragged. The whispers continued, soft and patient, dragging me forward, teasing me, calling me closer to the oldest section, to graves I hadn't even noticed before. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, to leave, to run. But some part of me, a foolish, cursed part, moved forward. The ground shifted beneath me. I stopped, heart hammering. The whispers seemed to react, circling me, thickening, forming words just out of comprehension. Names, places, warnings, promises. I couldn't make sense of them, but the intent was clear. They wanted me to stay, to listen, to answer. I took another step. The fog parted slightly, revealing a single grave smaller than the others, its stone cracked, illegible. The whispers gathered here, louder, stronger, more insistent. I could feel a pulse under my feet, something beneath the earth that was alive or pretending to be. And then I heard the voice again, distinct among the chorus. Not whispering this time. Clear, sharp, familiar. Daniel. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Couldn't think beyond the sound of my name, carried by voices that shouldn't exist, rising from graves that had been silent for decades. I knew then that this wasn't just a cemetery. It wasn't just old stones and fog and shadows. It was something else entirely. Something alive. Something patient. Waiting. And now it had noticed me. I don't remember how long I stayed there, frozen, listening. The whispers didn't stop. They never stopped. They only circled, waiting for me to answer, to do something, to acknowledge them. And somewhere in the back of my mind I knew with a certainty that made my chest ache, that leaving this place tonight would not end it. The whispers would follow me, creeping into my thoughts, into my dreams, into my waking hours. They would call my name again, and I would answer, because when the cemetery speaks, it finds a way to be heard. I thought the whispers were the worst part. I thought the way they burrowed into your mind, dragging memories you didn't want to remember, calling your name in voices that didn't belong to anyone living, would be enough to break me. But I was wrong. The footsteps came next. At first it was subtle, a soft crunch, the faintest disturbance in the fog just behind me. I froze, every nerve taut. My flashlight swung automatically, scanning the graves, the twisted trees, the leaning stones. Nothing, only the fog, curling around the headstones like smoke over a fire. I tried to convince myself it was the ground settling, maybe an animal, a branch snapping, anything rational. But the sound came again, footsteps, slow, measured, following me. Not random, not scattered. They matched my pace, my rhythm exactly. I stopped. They stopped. I moved. They moved. I felt my pulse spike, sweat running down my spine, the hairs on my neck standing stiff. I whispered, "Who's there?" My own voice sounded foreign, tinny, swallowed by the fog. No answer. only the footsteps echoing mine. I forced myself to keep walking. I had to. I couldn't stay still, trapped in the center of the cemetery with something mimicking me. My boots pressed into the wet earth, the fog thickening with every step. The whispers from before were quieter now, replaced by the soft, relentless rhythm behind me. I couldn't see whoever or whatever it was, but I knew it was there. I could feel it. I tried a trick I had used in training, in urban chases. Change direction, move erratically, see if the follower reacts. I veered left, cutting across rows of old gravestones. The footsteps mirrored me, exact and precise. My heart sank. This wasn't human. Not entirely. Nothing alive could do this. The cemetery felt endless. Every path looked the same. Gravestones leaned and twisted in ways that made me doubt my own memory. I would swear a row ended, but then it would continue. The fog thickened, blurring distances, hiding the edges of my vision. And behind me, the footsteps. I tried to pick up my pace. Running would solve it, I thought. But as I moved faster, I realized the sound followed perfectly, keeping up without effort as if it had been designed to match me. Panic bloomed in my chest. I couldn't breathe. My flashlight trembled in my hands, the beam cutting narrow lines through the fog, showing nothing but cold stone and the occasional twisted tree. I shouted, "Stop! Who's there?" My voice cracked. I wanted to run, but the earth beneath me seemed heavier with each step, slowing me, dragging me down. And the footsteps, relentless, mocking, perfect. I couldn't escape them. I stopped entirely, panting, my ears strained. The footsteps continued, but now I could hear something else, a subtle shift in their tone, almost a rhythm beyond imitation, a pulse. The presence behind me wasn't just following. It was learning. Feeling me, watching me. I shivered, turning slowly, flashlight scanning. Empty fog, empty stones, nothing alive. I whispered, almost to myself, This isn't possible." And that's when I felt it. The brush against my shoulder. Not physical, not solid, but a sensation like a cold hand hovering just above my skin. My breath caught and I spun around. Nothing. Fog, shadows, silence. Yet the footsteps continued. Precise, unrelenting behind me. I walked again. Carefully, deliberately, keeping my head down, hoping that if I ignored it, it would leave. It didn't. The footsteps shifted, mimicking every change, every hesitation, every pause. It was clever, intelligent, not human, not entirely. And it was patient. Oh God, it was patient. I passed the oldest section again, the crooked stones, the iron fences curling like claws. The fog here was thickest, curling around my legs, clinging to my boots. I felt like I was wading through water, though the ground was solid beneath me. The whispers from before returned, faint at first, then louder, weaving around the footsteps. A choir of unseen voices urging me forward. I forced myself to focus on a single point. A large, cracked tombstone leaning dangerously. I ran my hand along the cold marble, feeling the grooves, the moss, the rough cracks. The presence behind me shifted slightly, almost impatiently. I realized then that it wasn't just following me. It was studying me, learning me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I thought about shouting again, calling out, trying to name it, something to break its hold. But the words stuck in my throat. Fear, deep and primal, twisted in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet my legs felt like stone. The fog seemed to wrap tighter around me, and the footsteps followed, echoing in perfect mimicry. I tried something desperate. I stopped suddenly and crouched low, as if hiding might trick it. Silence fell. My heart raced. I didn't hear the footsteps. Relief surged, brief, sharp, and then the sound returned, directly behind me. Step for step, right on cue. I nearly screamed. I spun around again. Nothing, only fog curling around graves, leaning stones, twisted trees. No sign of life, and yet I knew it was there. I could feel it. Patient, waiting, omnipresent. I forced myself forward, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. Step by step, the footsteps followed, mocking, precise. And the whispers. They returned, calling my name, dragging me deeper into the oldest, darkest part of the cemetery. My chest tightened. I felt dizzy, unsteady. I was losing control, losing sense of time, space, reality. Every direction looked the same. Every row of graves seemed endless. The fog distorted distances, and the footsteps never stopped. Then I heard something new, a second set of footsteps, fainter, behind the first. I froze, heart pounding. It couldn't be real, could it? I wasn't imagining the first one, so why would I imagine another? But there it was. Not quite in sync, but moving faster, lighter. Always behind me, watching, waiting. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. I realized then that running wouldn't matter. This thing or things could follow forever. No matter the distance, no matter the path, no matter the night, they would never tire. They would never stop. They would follow, step for step, until they had me, until they did something I couldn't even imagine. I tried to speak, to break the tension, to assert myself. I'm not afraid. My voice sounded hollow, weak, pathetic. The fog swallowed it. The footsteps continued, mocking, echoing in the emptiness behind me. I thought about my family, about home, about leaving this place forever. But something anchored me here. Something in me, a foolish, cursed part, wanted to see it, wanted to confront it, wanted to know what had been watching, waiting, whispering all these nights. My curiosity was a chain, and the footsteps were the lock. I pressed on, moving toward a cluster of graves older than anything else. The whispers grew louder here, wrapping around the footsteps, forming words I almost understood. Names, dates, fragments of memories, and the footsteps. They split, diverged, circled, multiplied. I could feel them all around me now, surrounding me, keeping pace, never stopping, patient, intelligent, alive in a way I had never known life could be. A breeze stirred the fog. Shapes flickered in the periphery of my vision. I turned, but the light caught nothing. The footsteps continued. Always behind, always copying, always patient. I stumbled, falling hard into the dirt, mud clinging to my uniform. The flashlight skidded across the ground, illuminating the jagged stones, the twisted iron fences, the fog curling like smoke. And for a brief second, I saw it. No, them. Figures, faint, distorted, half solid, half shadow, mimicking my every movement. They moved in silence now, following, watching, learning. And I realized something worse than fear. They weren't just following me. They were me. Every step I took, every hesitation, every panic-stricken movement mirrored by them, as if they had existed in parallel, waiting for this moment, waiting for me to see them, waiting for me to understand that I was never alone. I forced myself up, hands trembling, dirt and sweat on my skin. The whispers grew to a crescendo, calling my name over and over. And behind me, the footsteps, step for step, echoing, perfect, patient, waiting. I ran. Or I tried to, but the fog swallowed me. The earth slowed me. And the footsteps, they didn't tire. They never would. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the truth. This wasn't a patrol anymore. This wasn't a walk through a cemetery. This was a test. And I had no idea what the rules were, but I could feel them. Step by step, breath by breath, always behind me, and I knew I wasn't going to get away. I thought I had seen everything the cemetery could throw at me. Shadows, whispers, footsteps that followed my every move. I was wrong. I hadn't seen the secret yet. The one thing that lingered beneath it all, patient, waiting. It started the night after the patrol with the footsteps. I couldn't sleep. The fog, the whispers, the echoing steps. They had followed me home, creeping into my thoughts, pressing against my mind like ice. I felt restless, drawn back to the cemetery as if it knew I would come, as if it wanted me to see. By the time I reached the gates again, the moon was a thin crescent, casting a pale silver light over the fog. The cemetery stretched before me, silent and still, but I could feel it. The weight of the earth, the pull of something beneath the stones. I pushed the gates open slowly. The metal groaned, but this time I barely noticed. I was already focused, already aware. I moved toward the oldest section, the part I had avoided before. The twisted iron fences, the jagged stones, the leaning monuments, all seemed to lean closer tonight, like spectators watching my approach. The fog curled around my legs, cold and damp, and the whispers drifted at the edges of my hearing, teasing, coaxing. Then I saw it, a gap between two stones, almost hidden by moss and creeping vines. It wasn't obvious. You could walk past it 100 times and never notice it. But something about it felt different, alive. It was a narrow space, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. And the ground beneath it looked softer, newer, unsettled. I knelt down, hands brushing aside moss and dirt. My fingers sank into the soil, fresh soil, not old, decayed earth like the rest of the cemetery, but soft and moist, as if it had been disturbed recently. My pulse spiked. I had to see. I had to know. I brushed away more dirt, uncovering the edge of a small wooden marker. No stone, no name. Just a crude, splintered board, half buried, leaning slightly. I felt a chill wash over me. Whoever or whatever was buried here hadn't been meant to be found. And yet, it was calling to me. I dug carefully, slowly, the soil cool and wet beneath my hands. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, surrounding me, circling me, urging me on. Step by step, inch by inch, I uncovered the outline of the grave. It was small, too small for an adult, too narrow for anything normal. My stomach turned. I had the distinct feeling that I shouldn't be here, that I was crossing a line that existed for a reason, and then I saw it. The first glimpse, a tiny, rough-hewn coffin, its wood darkened by age and moisture, partially exposed. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hands. The whispers shifted, pulsing around me, coalescing into something almost coherent. A single word, my name, repeated, drawn out, patient, insistent. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my hands. I knew I was close. Close to whatever the cemetery had been hiding all this time. And as I leaned closer, I felt it again. The presence. Not a shadow, not a whisper. Something alive, patient, watching, pressing against the back of my mind. I could feel eyes on me from below the soil, from the shadows, from the fog itself. I touched the coffin. Cold wood, rough edges, and then I felt it. Movement. Subtle. Almost imperceptible, like the earth beneath it shifted, like something inside was aware of me, conscious, alive. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the nausea curling in my stomach. My mind screamed at me to step back, to leave, but I couldn't. I had come too far. I cleared more soil, exposing the small coffin fully. The whispers grew louder, urgent now, almost frantic. Names, dates, words I didn't understand and yet somehow did. And then, for a brief, terrifying moment, I felt it, a presence rising, brushing against me, chilling me to the bone. Watching, waiting, expectant. I pulled back slightly, hands trembling, flashlight shaking. The whispers were all around me, filling my head, tugging at memories I hadn't thought about in years. My childhood, my family, old regrets. And beneath it all, a steady heartbeat. Not mine. Something else. Slow. Patient. Waiting. I realized then that this grave, this small, hidden coffin, was the center of it all. The whispers, the shadows, the footsteps, they were drawn to it. And now I was too. I had found it. And in doing so, I had made myself a part of it. I knelt there, staring at the coffin, unable to look away. The fog thickened, curling around me like fingers. The whispers swirled, pulling me into the earth, into the darkness beneath the stones. I felt the presence press closer, as if testing me, measuring me, deciding whether I belonged here or whether I should be left to the shadows. And then I saw a movement. Not a shadow, not a trick of the fog. Something small. A hand, a shape. The coffin trembled slightly beneath the soil, as if something inside was alive. My stomach turned over. I wanted to flee, to run, to never look back, but my body refused. My mind was tethered here, anchored by fear, curiosity, and something older, something patient. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the grave. The whispers receded slightly, watching me, waiting. I felt the presence linger, not just in the cemetery, but in me, deep in my chest, in my bones, in my blood. I had seen it. And now, it had seen me. I left the grave carefully, stepping over roots, avoiding the leaning stones. The fog swirled around me, almost protective now, guiding me toward the gates. The whispers were faint, distant, but I knew they hadn't stopped. They were inside me now, inside my thoughts, waiting for the moment I would forget, waiting for the moment I would return. I passed the edge of the oldest section, the twisted iron fences, the leaning stones. Everything seemed still, patient, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I had seen the secret. I had touched it. And it had marked me. Outside the cemetery, I paused, taking deep breaths. The fog clung to my boots, cold and wet, like a reminder that I had been inside, that I had seen what was hidden. The night was quiet now. Too quiet. I told myself I was safe. I told myself I could leave. But the presence lingered. Patient and patient, in my chest, in my mind, in my thoughts. I drove home slowly, hands tight on the wheel, flashlight sitting on the passenger seat, unused but still humming with the memory of the grave. I told myself I would never return. I told myself it was done. But deep down, I knew the truth. Once you've seen the hidden grave, once you've felt the presence beneath the stones, you are never free. The cemetery waits, the shadows wait, and the whispers. The whispers never stop. Even now, weeks later, I can feel it when I close my eyes. Beneath my house, beneath the roads, beneath the earth itself, patient, watching, waiting. And somewhere, in the dark, in the silence, I know it is still calling my name. Because some secrets are not meant to be found. And some graves are never truly empty. The rain had been falling all night, a steady drum on the roof of my cruiser, a rhythm that felt almost like a warning. I remember gripping the wheel and watching the wipers slice through the darkness, each swipe revealing more of the empty stretch of road ahead. This part of town, or maybe it was just this stretch of farmland, had a way of swallowing sound and light. Even the headlights seemed hesitant, like they didn't want to push through the fog and the wet. The call came in just after 10. Someone had seen lights, strange, flickering, unnatural, over the old Crawford place. The farmhouse had been abandoned for decades. Kids dared each other to go near it, but no one had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. My first thought was pranksters or drunks, maybe some hunters with flashlights. But the voice on the phone didn't sound like a kid. It trembled in a way I can't explain. There was genuine fear. By the time I got to the edge of the property, the rain had turned heavy, slick on the asphalt and splashing against the cruiser in sheets. I could barely make out the house through the haze. It wasn't just dark. It was darker than it should be, like the night had swallowed the building whole. Then the lights appeared. I blinked, and I thought I had imagined them. 2, maybe 3 pinpricks of light hovering in the air above the roof, moving slowly, almost deliberately. They weren't lanterns or flashlights. They didn't swing or flicker naturally. They glowed, soft but piercing, casting a weird reflection off the wet grass. The hair on my neck rose without permission. I reached for the radio, tried to call it in, but my hands were shaking, and the static seemed louder than usual. I stepped out of the cruiser. The rain soaked through my coat immediately, drenching me in cold and wet. The ground was soft, muddy, sucking at my boots as I moved closer. I wanted to call it in, to tell someone else to see this, but the thought of taking my eyes off the lights felt wrong. They moved again, slow, almost patient, like they were aware I was watching. I remember my own voice when I spoke, low, unsure. "Sheriff? Anyone here?" Nothing. The wind carried the rain in sheets across my face, but no answer came from the house. I felt drawn, like I was leaning into something I shouldn't. The air smelled wrong, damp, yes, but also metallic, like old blood mixed with wet soil. The porch was splintered and rotting. I stepped carefully, boots sinking into the wet wood, trying not to make noise. Inside, the house should have smelled of decay, mold, or dust. It smelled clean, sterile, too clean. My flashlight barely pierced the gloom, but the walls gleamed as though freshly painted. I thought maybe the light was reflecting off something, but there was nothing, just walls, empty rooms, silence that was almost physical. And then a sound. Soft, almost beneath hearing. I froze. It wasn't wind, it wasn't the rain. It was like a whisper of movement, the shift of a weight too subtle to identify. My pulse hammered in my ears. I reminded myself I'd been a sheriff long enough to know fear when it wasn't real, but this was something else. I moved further in. Each step echoed, a hollow sound that seemed far too loud for the size of the room. The light above the house moved again, flickering toward the back, then up, then pausing as if to consider me. My gut told me to leave, but my curiosity, stupid and stubborn, pushed me forward. There was furniture, or rather the faint impression of furniture. A chair tilted, but no one sat in it. A table had a plate on it, shiny and clean, as though someone had just eaten there moments ago. But the plate was empty. No crumbs, no stains, no signs of life. I stepped closer, my flashlight trembling in my grip, and saw footprints. Bare footprints, small, neat, leading down the hall. They were wet, like someone had just come inside from the rain, yet the rest of the yard was untouched. I called out again. My own voice sounded strange, almost swallowed by the house. "Hello, is anyone here?" No answer. The lights outside hovered, then suddenly blinked out. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse like it had been waiting for me to notice, to step closer. And then, a faint glow in the corner of my eye. I turned, and there it was. A faint shimmer, like heat rising off pavement, but too slow, too deliberate to be natural. I remember the pressure in my chest, the way my legs wanted to run and my mind wanted to stay. I was both terrified and mesmerized, caught in some cruel balance. The air felt heavier here, like gravity had increased, pressing down on my shoulders. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly with a rhythm that wasn't mine. The radio crackled finally. A voice, distant, shaky. "Sheriff? You there?" Relief hit me, but it was shallow, almost wrong. I answered quickly, words spilling out. "Yeah, I'm here. I don't know what I'm looking at. The lights, they're static." Then silence. I turned back. The shimmer was gone. The footprints, too. The house seemed ordinary again, decayed and empty like it should have been. I shook my head, told myself I was imagining it, that the rain and fatigue were messing with my senses. I got back to my cruiser, hands soaked, coat sticking to me, and tried to call it in again. No signal. Nothing. I sat there, engine running, listening to the rain, trying to convince myself it was just the imagination of someone who had grown up with stories about the Crawford place. But my gut, stubborn and uneasy, told me otherwise. I kept thinking about the lights, the footprints, the clean, empty rooms. Nothing added up. When I finally drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw them again, those tiny, hovering lights, flickering just above the roof, watching me leave. Then the fog and rain swallowed them once more. That night, sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the house, sterile and quiet, with empty rooms waiting and lights that weren't supposed to exist. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that the farmhouse hadn't finished with me. I told myself I'd return in the morning in daylight, when the fog lifted, when I could make sense of it. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. I had crossed into a space that shouldn't exist, seen something that shouldn't be seen, and the memory of it would follow me, wet and cold, for a long time. Even now, thinking back, I can feel the rain soaking through my coat, the mud sucking at my boots, the pressure of that unnatural air. I can see the lights, stubborn and unblinking, and hear that soft, unplaceable movement in the silence. The farmhouse waited, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know why. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew that the moment I turned the cruiser onto the muddy track leading to the Crawford place. But something about those lights, the clean, empty rooms, the way the farmhouse had watched me, wouldn't let me rest. The rain had stopped, but a heavy fog clung to the ground, curling around my tires as I drove. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes every sound, from a snapping branch to the creak of wood, feel like an intrusion. I parked near the edge of the yard. The farmhouse was there, staring at me through the fog, or at least I thought it was the same one. It looked newer. Fresh paint glimmered faintly, windows spotless as if someone had just polished them. The weeds along the path seemed trimmed, the broken fence boards straightened. My stomach turned. This place hadn't been maintained for decades. Nothing about it should have looked like this. I took my flashlight and stepped out. The mud grabbed at my boots again, dragging at me, trying to keep me from approaching, but I forced myself forward. Each step felt heavy, deliberate. My flashlight's beam cut through the fog, landing on the door. It was closed, locked. I didn't care. I tried it. It opened easily, without a sound. Inside, the farmhouse was pristine. I stopped in the entryway, letting my eyes adjust. There was no dust, no decay, no cobwebs. The air smelled faintly of wood polish and something else, something sweet and almost metallic. I could hear the faint drip of water somewhere in the house, but it wasn't the rain. I stepped in cautiously, my flashlight slicing through the dark. The living room was empty. Not in the sense of abandonment. Empty as in someone had just left minutes ago, maybe even seconds. Chairs were pushed in neatly against the table. A rug lay perfectly flat, no dirt, no stains. A fireplace held no ashes, only clean stones. And yet I had the sense that I wasn't alone, that the house itself was waiting, watching. I called out, my voice bouncing off the walls. "Hello, anyone here?" Only silence answered. My own words sounded strange to me, too loud, like echoes in a dream. I moved forward, each step careful. The floorboards creaked under my weight, but not all of them. Some spots remained silent, as though the house knew where I was stepping. I found the kitchen next. Same thing. Spotless counters, pots hung neatly, a knife block with knives that gleamed unnaturally. I opened the refrigerator. Empty. I opened the cabinets. Empty. Everything polished, clean, perfect. But not one human presence. No fingerprints, no crumbs, no warmth. Only a sense of someone, or something, having just left. It was then I noticed the small things. A chair slightly pulled back from the table, a book on the counter open to a page that hadn't been touched in decades. But the pages seemed undisturbed. A faint scuff on the floor, fresh, muddy, leading down the hallway. I followed it. Upstairs was quieter, heavier somehow. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step announcing my presence. The hall stretched before me, lined with doors closed and perfectly aligned. I tried each one. Empty. Bedrooms, closets, a bathroom, all empty. And yet every room whispered of recent occupation. Pillows fluffed, blankets neatly folded, a towel hanging as if someone had just used it. My hands shook, my flashlight beam wavering, but I pressed on. In the master bedroom, the sensation hit me fully. The room was larger than it should have been, walls stretching just slightly beyond normal perception, the ceiling higher than any ordinary house. The bed was made, corners sharp and crisp. On the nightstand, a glass of water, condensation forming at the edges, untouched. And then I saw it, a handprint. On the inside of the glass, faint but visible. Someone had been here. Someone human maybe, or maybe not. I backed up, my mind racing. This house shouldn't exist this way. The night before, it had been decayed, abandoned, crawling with shadows. Now it was alive, clean, waiting. I turned the flashlight to the windows. Fog clung to the glass outside, thick and swirling, but no footprints led to the house from the yard. Only the ones inside, fresh and muddy, as if the person or thing had vanished into the walls. I kept moving, drawn down the hallway. A door at the far end, slightly ajar. I approached slowly, every nerve screaming. The room inside was different. Not a bedroom, not a living space, but nothing I could name. Empty walls stretched on forever. No ceiling, no floor, only the faint shimmer of the air. My flashlight couldn't touch it fully, its beam fading, swallowed by darkness that didn't belong. I stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Heavy, wet, like breathing underwater. My own heartbeat sounded loud, too loud, echoing against something I couldn't see. And then I heard it, the sound of movement. Soft, deliberate, circling me. Not footsteps, too light, too quiet. Like someone pacing, just out of reach. My skin prickled, my flashlight shaking in my grip. "Show yourself," I said, voice low, almost pleading. Nothing, only the whisper of that movement around me. The shadows deepened, stretching, coiling. I could feel the pressure, the weight of unseen eyes, and suddenly the room wasn't empty. It was full. Full of presence, full of things I couldn't name. I stumbled back, tripping over nothing, or maybe something. The room shifted as I moved. The walls seemed to breathe, drawing closer, then retreating. I felt cold fingers brush my arm. Not real, I told myself, not real. And yet, the sensation lingered, crawling down my spine, sinking into my bones. I turned to leave. The hallway was gone. Only the empty room stretched before me, larger, endless. Panic rose, sharp and hot. I ran, but the steps echoed wrong, bouncing back from nowhere. I tried the door I had entered through, locked. No, not locked. Gone. Only wall. I remember collapsing to the floor, gasping, listening to the rhythm of my own heartbeat mingling with the faint, deliberate movement around me. The water glass upstairs, the handprint, flashed in my mind. Someone had been here, or something, and it had left me alone to discover the emptiness. I crawled forward, following the shimmer of the walls, the faint distortion in the air. Something moved with me, just beyond vision, not threatening yet, observing, waiting. I could feel its patience, and mine snapped. I ran blindly, crashing into walls that shouldn't exist, doors that appeared and disappeared as if mocking me. Eventually, I found the stairs again, or maybe they had always been there. I don't know. I bolted down them, almost falling. Mud and rain from the yard tracked inside, though the house had been spotless before. The front door loomed ahead, real this time, solid and tangible. I flung it open and stumbled outside, the fog swallowing me instantly. The farmhouse looked ordinary again, decayed, abandoned, the way it had been last night in the rain. Only the footprints leading in and out of the house remained. Mine, fresh, muddy, and trembling. And others, smaller, lighter, leading back into the fog, then vanishing. I stood there, chest heaving, rain beginning again, drizzling over me. I wanted to run, but my boots felt like they were glued to the mud. I shone my flashlight around the yard. Nothing. Just fog, just shadows, just silence. And yet the feeling of being watched lingered heavy, pressing down like the house had left part of itself behind, attached to me, tethered to my fear. I knew I had to leave, to get back to the cruiser, to something real. But my eyes kept drifting to the farmhouse. I wanted to scream, to call out, to challenge whatever had made it pristine, empty, perfect, and terrifying all at once. But no sound came. Only the whisper of fog and mud and the faintest sense of movement, just out of reach. When I finally made it back to the cruiser, soaked, shivering, I couldn't speak. I sat there staring at the fog, listening, and I realized the house had not finished with me. Not by a long shot. Those empty rooms had seen me, cataloged me, remembered the way I moved, the way I breathed, the way my fear grew with every step. Even now, hours later, I can feel it. The emptiness, the presence, the way the house stretches and folds around reality. The footprints in the mud, not mine alone. Something was there. Something waiting. And if I return, I know it will still be waiting, cleaner, emptier, and more patient than ever. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the farmhouse returned. Its empty rooms, the impossible cleanliness, the faint shimmer of air that didn't belong. I kept thinking about the footprints, the ones that weren't mine, that led in and out, vanishing without a trace. Morning came slow, gray, and reluctant. I told myself I had to go back, one last time, to understand, to confirm that what I had seen was real. The fog had rolled in overnight, thick and low, blanketing the fields around the farmhouse. It clung to the trees, curling around the fence posts, swallowing the horizon. The road to the Crawford place was barely visible, mud sucking at the cruiser's tires as I drove carefully. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me from the fog itself. When I reached the yard, I froze. The farmhouse was gone. Not like I hadn't noticed it before, gone entirely. No walls, no roof, no decayed wood, no signs of the house I had entered the night before. Nothing except the muddy path leading into the fog, the scattered remnants of rain-soaked grass, and my own footprints, wet and fresh, leading up to where it should have been. The air smelled damp, cold, and faintly metallic. But there was no house, no structure, nothing tangible to grasp or even acknowledge. I stumbled out of the cruiser, boots sinking into mud, and looked around. Panic didn't rise immediately. It was too surreal, too impossible. My brain struggled to catch up, to make sense. A house that had been real, walked through, touched, feared, vanished. I bent down, tracing the footprints with my hand. Mud clung to my fingers. They were mine, clear, wet, cold. And beside them, smaller prints, lighter, delicate, as though someone had walked beside me, guiding me. But there was no one. The fog shifted. It moved in slow, curling waves, thick enough to hide anything beyond a few feet. I squinted into it, trying to catch sight of the house, the doors, the windows, the rooms that had watched me, cataloged me. Nothing. Only mist. And then I heard it, a soft echo, almost imperceptible at first, like the faint scrape of a chair across a floor. I froze, heart hammering. The sound repeated, closer this time, then farther, circling, teasing. I couldn't locate it. It had no origin, no direction, no form, just presence, I called out, voice trembling. Hello? Is anyone there? My own voice sounded strange, hollow, distant. The fog swallowed it instantly. Silence. Only the faintest whisper of movement in the mud, the suggestion of prints that weren't quite mine. I followed them, compelled, terrified, each step sucking at me, pulling me toward the unseen. The field stretched endlessly in the fog. Trees loomed as dark shapes, distorted, monstrous, yet familiar. My flashlight did little to penetrate the gray. It only carved a small circle of reality around me, the rest lost to mist. I noticed the footprints again, small, wet, leading ahead. I followed them cautiously, feeling the weight of eyes that weren't mine pressing from every direction. Then I saw it. Something impossible. A shimmer in the fog, the faintest outline of a wall, a door frame, just at the edge of perception. My heart leapt. The farmhouse? Was it returning? I stepped closer. The shimmer flickered like a mirage, then collapsed into nothing. My hand went through it as if it were air. Panic set in. The farmhouse wasn't gone in the normal sense. It had never been solid, never been fully real. The rooms, the stairs, the walls, they existed when I was inside them, and only when I was inside them. Outside in daylight, they had never truly been there. The fog, the footprints, the impossible cleanliness, they were part of something else. Something alive, patient, waiting. I retraced my steps to the yard, mud squelching beneath me, hands shaking. My eyes scanned desperately. The house should have been there. I should have been able to see it, touch it, prove it was real. But all I could see was fog and mud and footprints fading slowly into nothing. And yet I felt it. The lingering presence, watching, waiting. I crouched down again, tracing the prints with trembling fingers. Mine and smaller ones alongside. Wet, cold, leaving impressions but no substance. I followed them into the fog, compelled, unable to stop. Each step took me deeper into that impossible space, where reality bent and the world became thin, fragile, as though the fog itself were the boundary between what was real and what was imagined. I heard my own voice again, echoing from the mist. Who's there? No answer. Only the faintest echo of laughter. Not loud, not human, but impossible to place, like the sound of rain bouncing on wet wood in a distant memory. My stomach churned. I wanted to turn back, to run, but my legs moved forward without permission. The footprints led me, pulled me, and I felt a strange compulsion, as if something wanted me to follow, to witness, to understand. And then suddenly, they stopped. The smaller prints vanished. Only mine remained, leading into nothing. The fog thickened, curling around me, pressing in. I could barely see my hands in front of me. The air grew heavier, wet, metallic, suffocating. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, loud, raw, unyielding. And then I realized this was the end. The house had left. The fog had claimed it. Only the mud and the footprints remained, echoes of a place that had never existed outside the perception of the fearful. I turned slowly, trying to take in my surroundings. The mist stretched endlessly, trees like shadows, ground sodden and treacherous. There was no path, no road, no landmark. Only footprints fading. Only the oppressive weight of the unseen waiting. I wanted to scream, but my voice stuck in my throat. I walked blindly, following the fading impressions of mud, hoping to find something solid, something real. Hours passed, or minutes. Time lost meaning. Every step felt heavier than the last. And then I realized, too late, that the farmhouse hadn't just vanished. It had pulled a piece of reality with it. The world around me felt thinner, weaker, like the fog had consumed not only the house, but the boundaries of what was real. A sound, sudden and close. A scrape, a shuffle, a whisper just behind me. I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing, only fog. But I knew it was there. Something unseen, trailing, patient, unhurried. Something waiting for me to falter. I stumbled over a tree root, mud flying, heart hammering. The footprints ahead, I recognized them. Not mine. Small, wet, delicate, leading further into the fog, into emptiness. I wanted to follow, feared to follow. And yet my feet moved forward, drawn, compelled, tethered to whatever had created the farmhouse, to whatever had led me here. And then I saw the final trace. A handprint, muddy fresh on the ground. My own, I realized, or had been. And next to it, smaller, lighter, fleeting, disappearing already. The farmhouse had vanished completely. Only the fog remained. Only the echo of presence, the memory of rooms, the impossible weight of emptiness. I sank to my knees, shaking, rain beginning to fall again, soaking me, washing away the mud. My eyes scanned the gray nothing, desperate, pleading, searching for something to hold on to. But there was nothing. No house, no door, no stairs, only wet earth, fog, and a sense of being watched, cataloged, remembered. When I finally forced myself back to the cruiser, soaked, exhausted, mind frayed, I glanced at the field one last time. The fog swirled, thick and unbroken. My headlights cut through it in small, feeble beams, but they revealed nothing. I couldn't tell where the yard ended and the world began. And I knew somehow that the farmhouse was still there, just beyond sight, beyond comprehension, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. Driving away, I didn't look back. The road ahead was muddy, gray, unwelcoming. I could still feel the house, the empty rooms, the shimmer of air pressing against my mind, tugging at my thoughts. Even now, hours later, I can sense it, lingering, waiting. The footprints in the mud, faint and delicate, haunt my memory, and I know they aren't gone. They will never be gone. The farmhouse doesn't exist outside the fog, outside the perception of fear. But it exists, patient, deliberate, in the space between what is real and what is imagined. And one day it will choose again. The rain didn't stop. It never really had. Not tonight. Not on this stretch of asphalt that cut through the outskirts of nowhere. My windshield wipers were a blur, swiping furiously, but the water beat them back faster than they could clear it. Every droplet hit like a small, cold drum against the glass, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the only thing moving in a world that had gone utterly silent. Except for the rain, I'd been driving these roads for years. Patrolling, checking on the occasional stranded motorist, watching the shadows stretch long and empty between the trees. But tonight something felt wrong. Even before I saw him, he was standing there, just a figure at the edge of the shoulder, hood pulled low, head down. At first, I thought it might be some fool out for a late-night stroll, or maybe someone drunk who wandered off from a party in the middle of nowhere. But he wasn't moving with the wind or the rain. He was still, like a statue someone had left there to make me nervous. I slowed the cruiser, the tires hissing through the wet asphalt. My heart started a slow, steady thump, and I caught myself holding my breath. The rain seemed louder now, or maybe it was just my pulse drowning out everything else. I couldn't see his face. He was just a shape, dark against the blur of neon lights reflecting off the wet road. I pulled to a stop a few feet past him. My door creaked as I opened it, and the smell of wet earth and rubber filled my nose. The rain hammered down, soaking through my coat before I even got a step outside. I called out, my voice muffled by the storm. "Hey, you need a ride?" No answer, just the constant drum of rain. I squinted. For a moment, I thought he'd turned to walk away, but then I realized he hadn't moved an inch. My gut tightened. Something about him was off. There was a stillness in the way he stood, like the world had forgotten him existed. A hitchhiker at midnight wasn't unusual, but this felt deliberate, like he was waiting for me specifically. I shook my head, telling myself to calm down. Maybe it was the storm, maybe it was the empty roads playing tricks on me, but there was a weight in my chest, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. I glanced down at my hands, clenched, shaking. Not from the cold, no. I'd been out in worse storms. It was something else. Fear, maybe. Or anticipation. I took a step toward him, boots squelching in the puddles. The rain poured down harder and lightning split the sky, making the road flash white for a heartbeat. I thought I saw his face in that flash. Just for a second, a pale blur under the hood. And in that second, I felt it. That pull like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. I blinked and he was gone. I froze. No, not gone. He hadn't moved. I had. My eyes were tricking me. I was imagining things. The storm was messing with my head. I got back in the car, slammed the door. Heated seats couldn't warm me up, couldn't chase the unease from my chest. I stared out through the windshield, but the figure hadn't moved. He hadn't even raised his head, just standing there, soaked, patient. Waiting, I muttered under my breath. What the hell are you doing out here? Again, nothing. The highway stretched behind him, wet and empty. Trees leaned in like spectators, their branches slick with rain. The streetlights flickered, one after another, until the world seemed to pulse with shadow and light. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something else. Something faint, metallic, blood. I tried to shake the thought. I was tired. Maybe overworked. Maybe I was letting the storm get to me. I stepped out again, just to make sure. I grabbed my flashlight from the console, the beam cutting a swath through the downpour. I swept it over him, and then my stomach dropped. The light hit him straight in the chest, and for the first time, I saw his face. Not fully, just enough, pale, almost waxy. Eyes hidden under the hood, staring straight at me. I didn't like what I saw. Not the face itself, but the absence behind it. Like he wasn't just looking, he was seeing. Seeing through me. Through everything I thought I knew. I swallowed hard. I wanted to say something, but my tongue felt heavy. My fingers trembled around the flashlight. I took a step back, and the rain pelted me harder, as if punishing me for hesitation. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even seem aware of the storm battering him. And yet, I felt like he was moving in my mind, pressing closer with every heartbeat. My pulse thudded in my ears. I stepped back into the car. Locked the doors. Engine running, windshield wipers fighting the rain. I kept the flashlight on him for a moment longer, just to make sure he hadn't disappeared like before. He was still there, waiting, watching. I took a deep breath and forced my hands to steady on the wheel. Okay, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Just a hitchhiker. Just a kid out here in the storm. But the rational words didn't make sense. Didn't touch the hollow weight in my chest. I rolled down the window a crack. You want a ride? My voice was firmer this time, but it shook anyway. He lifted his head. Just a flick, enough to reveal his eyes. Eyes that made me want to look away, but I couldn't. Dark, and yet not dark. Like looking into the shadow of something I couldn't name. And then he nodded almost imperceptibly. Just enough for me to see. And that was it. I unlocked the doors. I got out. Rain soaked me instantly, water running down my face, dripping into my collar. I gestured toward the passenger side. Get in, he stepped forward. Wet boots squelching against the asphalt, coat plastered to his body. He didn't speak. Didn't look at me again. Just opened the door and slid inside. Silence. Thick and suffocating. I closed the door, leaned back against the seat. I kept staring at him, but he just stared out the windshield, hands folded in his lap, motionless. The heater hummed, the rain pounded the roof, and the world beyond the glass felt impossibly far away. I turned the key in the ignition, and the car roared to life. Tires hissed as I eased back onto the wet highway. The lights of distant towns flickered, barely visible through the curtain of rain. But every mile, every turn, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for something. For me, the radio was static. Only the rain filled the silence. And I realized that the road didn't just stretch ahead. It stretched into something I couldn't see, couldn't understand. Something patient. Something hungry. I stole glances at him from the corner of my eye. No one else would have noticed. No one else would have cared. But I felt it. The way he fit into the car, into the storm. Like he had always been there. Like he belonged to it and not to me. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time didn't feel the same. Every flash of lightning illuminated him for a heartbeat. And every time I caught his shadow in the passenger seat, it felt too heavy. Too alive. And the rain. It didn't let up. Not for a second. I didn't speak. I didn't want to. I didn't know if I could. And he didn't either. He just sat there waiting, as if the night itself had folded into the car, leaving only the two of us in its wet, endless shadow. I gripped the wheel tighter, and somewhere deep in my chest, a cold certainty settled in. This wasn't just a ride. This wasn't just a hitchhiker. And I knew, even as the storm clawed at the edges of the world, that nothing about tonight would ever be the same again. I hadn't spoken since he got in. Not a word. The storm hammered the roof, the wipers swiped back and forth, and the tires hissed through the standing water on the highway. I kept glancing at him, careful not to let him notice. But somehow, I knew he noticed me, always. It wasn't just the way he looked out the window, pretending to watch the rain streak past. It was the way he existed. Too still, too precise, too quiet. Almost deliberate. And then there was his eyes. God, his eyes. I hadn't seen them fully before. The hood shadowed most of his face, but now, with the streetlights flickering in rhythm with the storm, I caught glimpses, and when I looked straight at them, I felt it. Something crawling under my skin. Like ice through my veins. Like the air had thickened, pressing on my chest. They weren't normal. Not human. I tried to shake it. Told myself I was imagining things. Exhaustion, storm fatigue, the long hours patrolling empty highways. But every time the light caught them, they glinted, piercing. Black pupils too wide, too still, almost liquid. And the whites, they weren't white. Not really. Gray maybe, but moving, like smoke curling under the surface. I blinked and my stomach knotted. I cleared my throat, trying to fill the silence. Where are you headed? My own voice startled me in the car, loud over the rain. He didn't answer. Didn't even flinch. He just looked. Looked at me as though he could see straight through the steering wheel, straight through the wet windshield, straight through me. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening on the wheel. You lost or something? I tried again, softer this time, hoping he'd speak, hoping anything. Still nothing. Just those eyes, watching, waiting, measuring. I glanced at the rearview mirror. I couldn't see much. Rain streaked the glass, distorted reflections bouncing along the interior. But in that murky gray, I caught a hint of him. Not fully, just enough. A shadow under the hood, eyes catching the faint glow of the dash lights. And in that shadow, I felt the cold certainty again. He wasn't just watching me. He was studying me. Learning. The highway stretched out like a ribbon, wet and black. The radio cracked and hissed, static filling the empty spaces between the drops of rain. I flipped through stations, trying to find something, anything, that could break the tension, but there was only noise. Only white noise. And I realized I didn't want to break the silence. Not really. Because in the silence, I could feel him. Close. Unmoving. Unyielding. I forced my eyes back to the road. You hitchhike a lot? I asked, trying to sound casual. A shrug. Not natural, not like a human shrug. It was precise, like a motion copied from somewhere else. And then those eyes flicked to me. Just a second. Just enough to make my chest tighten. I swallowed. My hands were slick on the wheel. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried to force a laugh, a normal sound. Rain's pretty bad tonight, huh? The headlights reflected in his eyes, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw something move behind them. Something darker. Something alive. I blinked. Gone. Just him. Just those endless, impossible eyes. I told myself again, I'm imagining it. I'm imagining it. I've been driving too long. It's the storm. It's the loneliness. It's nothing. But my gut knew better. The next stretch of road opened into a slight curve. I slowed, tires slicing through puddles. And I noticed it. The way he shifted ever so slightly in the seat. Not enough to see, really, but enough to feel. Like the air in the car had changed. Like gravity itself had tilted toward him. Where are you from? My voice was shaky this time. I barely recognized it. He didn't answer. Not with words. But his eyes, they moved. Tracked mine, following, reading, waiting. I tried to look away, to glance at the dashboard, at the wet street, at anything but him. But I couldn't, not really. And then it hit me. The road wasn't just wet. The air inside the car felt heavy, thick, like breathing through water. My throat constricted. My vision blurred around the edges. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. He was affecting me, somehow, changing me, with just the weight of those eyes. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. I don't know why I picked you up, I stammered. Shouldn't have stopped. Nothing. Silence. Watching. I kept driving. The storm swallowed the world outside. Trees blurred into gray streaks, headlights reflecting off the puddles in jagged lines. My mirrors showed nothing but rain and dark shadows, and yet I could feel him behind me, a presence that wasn't supposed to be there. I reached for the glove compartment, pretending to search for something. Maps, maybe, old papers, anything. My fingers trembled. I kept glancing at him, and every glance made my chest tighten more. His eyes weren't blinking, not once. Not even when the lightning flashed. A knot of fear grew in my stomach. A whisper in my mind, you should stop. You shouldn't go further. But the rational part of me said no. It's just a kid, just a hitchhiker. I'm overthinking it. But deep down, I knew the rational part was wrong. I noticed my speed creeping up. A way to escape the tension, maybe, to outrun whatever this was. But you can't outrun eyes like that. Not the ones that see past everything. Not the ones that make your own thoughts feel loud and exposed. The radio cut out completely. Static swallowed the last remnants of normalcy. I flicked switches, tried to find something, anything, but there was nothing. Only the rain, only him, and then he spoke. Not words. Not really. Just a sound. A soft, low hum like wind through dead branches. But it wasn't outside. It was inside me. In my chest, vibrating through my bones. I froze, every muscle locked. My heart stuttered. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe properly. He tilted his head slightly, that shadowed hood catching the pale flash of the dashboard. And I realized it wasn't a question or a statement. It was recognition, understanding, and fear. Real, raw, undeniable fear. I swallowed hard. Tried to move my fingers. Tried to steer. Tried to speak. What do you want? Silence. And yet the hum lingered. Like it had always been there, beneath the noise of the storm, beneath the asphalt, beneath everything I thought I knew about the world. I dared to glance fully at him, and I saw them. His eyes unblinking, perfect in the darkness, liquid shadows swimming beneath the surface. And in that instant, I knew he could see the truth. Not just what I was doing or where I'd come from, but the things I'd buried, the things I'd hidden. The corners of my mind I didn't even dare enter. I felt exposed, vulnerable, tiny, and the realization sent a cold shock through me. I turned back to the road, gripping the wheel so tightly it dug into my palms. Tried to force normal breathing. Tried to remind myself I was a sheriff, trained, experienced. Nothing could shake me. But nothing mattered. Not now. Not with him. The road stretched on endlessly. The rain blurred the lights. My mirrors reflected nothing but shadows. And yet behind me I knew he was there, waiting, watching, learning. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Words felt meaningless. My throat felt raw from unsaid questions. And in the silence, in the hum, in the weight of those impossible eyes, I realized something I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a ride. This wasn't just a storm. This was something else. Something patient. Something ancient. Something that had chosen me. I glanced sideways at him, and he finally spoke. Or maybe thought. Or maybe the sound came from the air itself. I couldn't tell. But it was enough. Just enough. And in it, I heard a single word or a single promise. Watch. And I did. I didn't know what I was supposed to see, but I knew it would change everything. The storm hadn't let up. It never did. It felt like it would never end. Like the rain had claimed the world and left only the two of us on this stretch of highway that seemed to stretch into nothing. My hands were still tight on the wheel, but I couldn't stop glancing at him, half afraid, half compelled, as if the car itself had become a corridor into something I wasn't meant to see. I tried to focus on the road, tried to remind myself that I was the sheriff, experienced, calm under pressure, but every time I blinked, every time the wipers swiped the glass, I caught him out of the corner of my eye. Eyes that weren't just eyes, they were voids, black and gray, swirling like ink in water. And they were on me, always on me. I reached for the radio, desperate for noise, for something to break the tension, but static answered. I twisted knobs, flipped switches, nothing. Dead air. Just the rain hammering the roof. Just the tires cutting through puddles. Just him, silent and still. I tried to make conversation. You have a name? My voice sounded thin and uncertain even to me. No answer. Not a word. Just that look. Like he knew the question before I asked it and had already decided it wasn't worth answering. The highway curved gently, then straightened again. I tried to lose myself in the rhythm. Wipers, tires, rain, heartbeat. But the rhythm didn't help. The air inside the car had thickened, heavy with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, but more than that. Presence. Something pressing in from all sides, so subtle that at first I thought it was my own imagination. But it wasn't. I dared a glance in the rearview mirror. Just a flick. My stomach sank. He was there, always there, sitting as though he had never moved. But the shadows clung to him differently now, darker, deeper, shapes that weren't shapes, shadows that shouldn't be there. I jerked my eyes away, telling myself I was seeing things. I wasn't, not really. The road ahead stretched on endlessly. I couldn't see where it led, couldn't see any landmarks, any signs, any light besides the dull glow of my headlights, swallowed almost immediately by the rain. I realized with a sudden, hollow certainty, we weren't just driving through a storm. We were driving through something else, something waiting, something that had always been waiting. I forced my eyes back on the road. Tried to breathe normally, tried to convince myself I was rational, that I was fine, that nothing had changed except for the weather. But the air kept shifting. My breaths felt shallow. My chest felt tight. And then I noticed something else. The engine sound, the tires on the asphalt. They weren't normal. Not really. The hum of the car seemed muted, as if the rain had absorbed all noise except for the pulse of my own heartbeat. I glanced sideways at him again. He hadn't moved. His hood still shadowed most of his face. But his eyes, oh God, those eyes. I could see them in the faint dashboard light now, glinting, catching every reflection from the wet road, watching, studying. I felt exposed in a way I had never felt before, like my thoughts were no longer private, like he could reach into the corners of my mind I had spent decades keeping locked. I gripped the wheel tighter, tires slicing through the water, my pulse hammering, and I realized that the road itself had changed. It wasn't just wet. It wasn't just slick. It was endless. No turns, no curves, no exits. Just black asphalt vanishing into shadows that seemed thicker than night, denser than the storm. The radio cut completely. No static, no hiss, just nothing. And in the silence, I could hear something else. Soft, almost imperceptible. Breathing? No, not breathing. Something subtler, closer, closer than my own heartbeat. I dared to glance at him again. He shifted slightly. Not enough for a human to notice, but enough for me to feel it. Enough for the weight of him to shift the air in the car. I tried to speak. Where are we going? No answer. Not even a glance. Just that same unwavering, impossible stare. I realized then that he had never looked at the road, never looked outside. He was always looking at me, through me, into me. And that realization made my chest constrict even further. I turned my gaze forward again, and that's when it happened. The headlights caught something on the side of the road. Just a shadow at first, a shape that seemed impossible, stretching and bending with the rain. I blinked. It wasn't there. I blinked again. It had moved. Just slightly, but moved in a way that no human could. I slammed my hands on the wheel, heart hammering, adrenaline slicing through my veins. What the? He raised his hand. Just slightly. Not in warning. Not in greeting. Just raised. And the shadow on the side of the road froze. And then disappeared. Just like that. Gone. I swallowed hard. Tried to convince myself it had been my eyes, my mind, my exhaustion. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. The rest of the drive was worse. Every shadow on the roadside seemed alive. Every glint of light in the puddles seemed to reflect something that shouldn't exist. And every time I glanced at him, he was the same, still, silent, watching, waiting, always waiting. I reached for the radio again, desperate for anything, even static. Nothing. And then I realized something else. The road itself had changed. It wasn't just endless. It was silent. Not just quiet, but oppressive, unnatural. The sound of tires on wet asphalt had dulled. The rain seemed softer, more distant, like it was happening somewhere else, somewhere far away, and yet inside the car, the storm raged. The rain hammered. The air pressed down, and he remained untouched by it, silent, calm, watching. I tried to force myself to speak again. Who? What are you? No answer, no reaction. Nothing but those eyes, fixed on me, heavy and endless. I realized then that asking questions was pointless, that the answers didn't matter, that whatever this was, whatever he was, it didn't exist in the realm of answers. It existed in the realm of fear, in the realm of knowing. I dared a glance in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. Not him, not exactly, but a shadow. Darker than the night outside, darker than the rain. A shape that didn't belong to any living thing. Stretching, bending, moving in ways the human body couldn't. I blinked. It was gone. Didn't speak. Couldn't. My chest was tight. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to escape. But I couldn't. Not with him. Not with those eyes. Not with the weight of the silence pressing in from all sides. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. I had no sense of time. The road didn't change. The shadows didn't recede. The storm didn't falter. And the car felt alive in a way that terrified me, vibrating with some hidden rhythm, beating in tandem with my pulse. And he was the calm in the center of it, the still point, the anchor that made everything else feel unreal. I tried to look away, tried to focus on the lines on the road, the glint of headlights, anything normal, but the moment I did, I felt him, felt the shift, felt the pressure of those impossible eyes in the back of my skull. I realized then he could see me even when I wasn't looking, could see the parts of me I didn't even see. I swallowed hard, tried to breathe, tried to calm myself, but the storm inside the car was louder than the storm outside, and the silence between us. It was alive. Then suddenly the road curved, a small bend, the only one I remembered seeing. And in that bend, the headlights caught something. Not on the roadside. Not a shadow. Not a reflection. Him. Or maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was the thing he had brought with him. Standing in the middle of the lane. Perfectly still. Waiting. And for the first time, I noticed the shape of it. Not fully human. Not fully animal. Something in between. Something wrong. I slammed the brakes. Tires skidding. Rain spraying. My heart in my throat. I screamed, more in panic than words, and then it was gone. Just like that, and yet the feeling remained. The oppressive, creeping weight that had settled in my chest from the moment I had picked him up. The knowledge that something had chosen me, that I couldn't escape. That the road itself wasn't mine anymore. I kept driving. Couldn't stop. Couldn't turn back. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even think clearly. The storm, the rain, the shadows, the eyes. They had claimed me. And I realized, with a clarity that chilled me to the bone, I was no longer the one in control. Not tonight. Not ever again. I stole glances at him. Still there, silent, watching, waiting. And I knew then that the road, the rain, the endless night were all part of him now. And part of me too. And in the silence, in the storm, in the endless highway that swallowed the world, I understood one thing with terrible certainty. The night was alive. And he was its heart. And I was trapped inside it. The road had swallowed everything by now. Trees, signs, the faint glow of distant lights, gone. Only the highway, endless and black. And the rain that never stopped. And him, always him, sitting in the passenger seat like he had been there for decades. Like he had always belonged. I was tired. Exhausted, bone-deep tired. My eyes burned from staring at the dark, the rain, the endless stretch of wet asphalt. But I couldn't look away from him. Not really. Not entirely. His presence weighed on me in a way I didn't understand. Heavy. Patient. And those eyes, God, those eyes. Still watching, still seeing, still knowing. I caught myself glancing into the rearview mirror, almost by accident. Just a quick look to check the road behind me. But the reflection made my blood run cold. There was someone in the back seat. Not him. Not exactly. Something darker. Something that shouldn't exist. A shape barely visible in the dim reflection, hunched slightly, shadowed by the storm and the interior lights. I blinked. Tried to tell myself it was a trick of the glass, the rain, exhaustion, but it wasn't. My stomach tightened. My chest felt hollow, and I knew, without a doubt, that something was back there. Watching, waiting. I swallowed hard. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly the knuckles burned. I stole another glance in the mirror, and this time, it moved. Slightly. A twitch in the shoulder, a flick of a head. Not enough for a human to notice, but enough for me to feel it. Enough to make my pulse spike. I swallowed again. My throat felt dry, raw. "Who's there?" I whispered, not really expecting an answer. Not really wanting one. Of course, there was none. Just the storm, the tires, and that oppressive silence that had settled inside the car. But the weight of it, it pressed down on me like water. Heavy, crushing. I realized with a sickening certainty that whatever was in the back seat, it wasn't human. Not fully, not alive in the way I understood life. I tried to focus on the road, tried to remind myself I was a sheriff, experienced, calm under pressure. But the mirror wouldn't let me. Every time I glanced at it, I saw the shadow, and behind it, glimpses of movement, shapes that shouldn't exist, and the faintest hint of a face, pale, hollow, watching. I swallowed hard and forced my eyes forward. My pulse thudded in my ears. My fingers dug into the wheel. I tried to speak to him, to the hitchhiker, anything to break the tension. You see it too, don't you?" My voice was low, shaky. He didn't answer. Didn't turn to look. Didn't flinch, just sat there, still, calm, eyes fixed ahead. Watching me. Always watching. And I realized then that he didn't need to speak. He didn't need to move. He existed in a way that made words unnecessary. Presence alone was enough to terrify. I stole another glance in the mirror. And this time I couldn't look away. The shadow was clearer now. A form, hunched, twisting slightly as though testing the edges of reality. Its face, I couldn't see it fully, not yet. But I knew it wasn't alive. Not like anything alive should be. And yet I felt it breathe. Or rather, I felt its breathing. Heavy, slow, deliberate, in sync with some rhythm that was older than the storm, older than the highway, older than the night itself. I blinked. It shifted. Closer. Not physically, not really, but the sense of it pressed into me like a wave, hollowing out my chest. I wanted to scream. Wanted to slam the brakes and run. But the car didn't feel like my own anymore. Not entirely. And him. He remained untouched by fear, untouched by the storm, untouched by what was back there. I forced my eyes forward. Tried to breathe. Tried to calm myself. But every time I moved, every time I thought I could ignore it, I felt it. Felt the weight of the shadow pressing, pressing, pressing. I dared another glance in the mirror. The shape was closer now. More defined. I could see the outline of a head. A shoulder. Something in the faint reflection of its face. And then I realized it wasn't the back seat it had occupied before. It was closer to me now, a presence at the edge of my awareness, brushing against the periphery of my mind. I gasped. My knuckles burned on the wheel. I told myself I was hallucinating, exhausted, overworked, the storm playing tricks. But deep down I knew better. I had felt it move. I had felt it breathe. And I had felt its attention shift entirely onto me. I risked a glance at him. The hitchhiker. Still calm. Still silent. Still watching. And then I understood something I didn't want to. He wasn't afraid. Not of it. Not of the shadow. He existed with it. Knew it. Maybe even controlled it. And that realization made the hair on my neck stand on end. I swallowed hard. Tried to speak again. What is it? No answer. Just that same patient, unreadable stare. And the shadow? The shadow twisted again. Almost like a smile. Almost like it knew something I didn't. And I realized I was trapped. Not by the car. Not by the storm. Not by the road. Trapped by knowledge I didn't want. Trapped by something older, darker, and far more patient than I could comprehend. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, the headlights slicing through rain, the tires hissing on the wet asphalt. But the world had narrowed. It existed only inside the car, inside the reflection, inside the storm. And inside me, I dared one final glance in the mirror. The shadow was gone, vanished, but the space it had occupied felt heavier, thicker, pressing in. I could feel its absence like a void that lingered. I realized then that absence could be more terrifying than presence. That what wasn't there could haunt you harder than anything visible. I risked looking at him. The hitchhiker. Calm, still, unreadable. And his eyes? His eyes seemed to glint with a knowing I didn't possess. He wasn't just part of the storm. He wasn't just part of the night. He was part of this, part of the shadow, part of the highway, and I was just along for the ride. I swallowed hard. Tried to breathe. Tried to focus on the road. But the silence had changed. It was no longer empty. No longer just the absence of sound. It was alive. A low, insistent hum that vibrated through the car, through the rain, through the asphalt, through my chest. And I knew it was watching, waiting, judging, patiently. I stole another glance in the mirror. Empty. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there. Always there. Just beyond sight. And that realization, that constant creeping knowledge, was worse than seeing it. I turned my eyes forward, heart hammering. Tried to steady my hands. Tried to force normal breathing. But the weight of the storm, the shadow, and him pressed in from all sides. And I realized with a chilling clarity that I was no longer driving the car, no longer in control of the road, no longer in control of the night. I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering, and I realized with a sinking certainty that nothing from this night would ever be the same. That the shadow, the storm, and the hitchhiker had changed something inside me, something permanent. Something that would follow me long after the rain stopped, long after the road ended, long after the night gave way to day, and then I glanced at the mirror one last time. Empty. But the weight remained. Pressing, watching, waiting. And I knew. I wasn't alone. The storm hadn't let up. I don't think it ever would. Not tonight, not ever. Hours, or maybe minutes, had passed on the highway that stretched like black silk into nothing. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My back ached from tension. My chest ached from the constant pressure of him beside me. The hitchhiker. Silent. Still. Watching. I couldn't remember how long I'd been driving. The rain blurred everything into a single endless smear. My headlights cut only a few feet ahead. The mirrors reflected nothing but darkness, and the car itself seemed swallowed by the storm. And him, always him. The calm, patient, impossible presence I tried to speak. Tried to break the silence that had become unbearable. Where are you going? My voice sounded foreign in my own ears. Shaky, thin. No answer. Not a word. Not even a glance. Just the same unreadable stare, dark eyes fixed ahead. And I realized I didn't want him to answer. Because if he spoke, if he moved, if he did anything at all, I would know too much. And I wasn't ready for that. The road seemed endless, and I knew, somewhere deep in my chest, that it had changed. Not the asphalt, not the markings, not the geography, no. Something deeper. Something darker. It felt alive, pressing, waiting, and I couldn't escape it. Not with him. Not alone. Not ever. I tried to convince myself to focus on the road, to pretend this was normal. But my own reflection in the windshield kept catching my eye. Pale face, wide eyes, unshaven, soaked to the bone. And behind me in the passenger seat, he was still there. Still calm. Still silent. Still impossible. I swallowed hard. My pulse hammered. Tires hissed through the water, windshield wipers slicing through the storm. And then, it happened. I glanced down for just a second, adjusting the radio, flipping through the stations, searching desperately for something, anything, to break the silence. And when I looked up, he was gone, not the shadow of him. Not a trick of the storm. Gone. Passenger seat empty. I froze. The engine hummed. The tires hissed. The rain drummed a relentless beat on the roof. But he was gone. I slammed the brakes. Tires skidded, water spraying in arcs along the asphalt. My heart pounded in my ears. I fumbled with the locks, the doors, the handle. Nothing. Empty. Nothing but the storm and the endless highway. and then I noticed it, a mark on the seat. Not a wet patch, not a stain. Something deeper, etched into the leather, shaped like a hand, but wrong, too long, too narrow. Fingers stretched impossibly far, like they had pressed through the fabric of reality itself. A final, silent signature left behind. I swallowed hard. My pulse thudded. The car felt colder, emptier, but somehow heavier. I realized then that his absence was not relief. It was worse. Worse than being watched. Worse than being trapped in the storm. Worse than the endless, oppressive silence. He hadn't left. Not really. He had only moved beyond me, beyond the car, beyond what I could see or understand. And that knowledge, that impossible, unexplainable certainty, made my stomach knot tighter than ever. I drove on, slowly, carefully, eyes scanning the mirrors, the road, the shadows at the edge of the headlights. But he didn't return. The passenger seat remained empty. And yet I felt him, always there, lingering, pressing into the spaces between my thoughts, into the spaces between the tires and the asphalt, into the spaces that the storm had left behind. The rain continued without pause. The tires cut through puddles, the windshield wipers swiped endlessly, and I drove. Not because I wanted to, not because I thought I could escape, but because stopping felt like inviting something worse, something patient, something waiting. I reached a small town eventually, or at least I thought it was a town. Lights flickered in the distance, faint and uneven, swallowed again by the storm. I slowed, pulled onto a side road, hoping against hope to see something human, something alive, something real. The car shivered under me, tires skimming water, wipers flailing. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. But the mark remained. Faint, impossible. A reminder. A signature. A message. Something I couldn't ignore. I tried to speak aloud as if saying it could make it real.
Who? What are you?
My voice cracked. My chest burned. My pulse hammered like a jackhammer. But the storm only answered with rain, the tires with hiss, the silence with its own weight. And I realized something else. Something worse than absence. The moment he left the seat, the world outside shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but subtly. Shadows stretched differently. The air felt heavier. The rain fell in sharper patterns, almost deliberate. Like the world had bent slightly to where he had been. Like reality had been measured against him. And I had failed the measurement. I drove on. Town lights faded. Highway stretched endlessly again. The storm raged. The seat was empty. And yet I could feel him, always there. Watching, waiting. I understood finally that his presence was no longer about proximity. It was about inevitability, about knowledge, about something that had chosen me and would never let go. I reached into the passenger seat, felt the wet leather, the imprint, cold, impossibly cold. My fingers traced the lines of the mark, and I knew it wasn't just a mark, not just a reminder. It was a warning, a promise, something beyond human understanding, something older than the storm, older than the asphalt, older than the night itself. I tried to start the engine. Tires hissed, windshield wipers sliced, rain hammered. I drove on. Faster now, faster than the storm, faster than the shadows, faster than the empty seat beside me. And yet the weight of him remained, pressing, watching, patient. Hours or maybe minutes passed. Time was meaningless. The road remained endless. The storm remained relentless. And I realized finally, with a shiver that went straight through my bones, that I would never be alone again. Not really. Not ever. I glanced at the seat one last time. Empty. The mark faint in the dim dashboard light. I didn't try to touch it. Didn't try to make sense of it. Didn't try to fight it. I just drove. And somewhere deep in the storm I knew. He was still there. Always there. Waiting, watching, patient. And I would see him again. They say old minds never truly die. That's what I was reminded of the night I first heard the calls from the edge of Hollow Creek. I'd been sheriff here for nearly 15 years, seen my fair share of strange. But the mine, that mine had a weight to it, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Locals had been whispering for months, shouts and screams that clawed out of the dark, heard only after sundown. Most shrugged it off, claimed it was drunken voices or the wind twisting through tunnels. But I don't shrug. I investigate. That's the job. That night, the sky had gone purple as the sun dipped, the kind of heavy dusk that presses against your chest. I pulled on my coat, feeling the chill creep past the seams, and started toward the mine. The road to it was narrow, almost forgotten, lined with gnarled oaks that looked like they'd been standing since before the town existed. The headlights barely cut through the mist. I drove slowly, listening to the engine hum, feeling the quiet press closer. Somewhere behind me, the wind carried a faint sound, like a hollow sigh. My mind tried to pin it down to branches or distant water, but it lingered, just beyond reasoning. I parked at the edge of the mine where the old board sealed the entrance. The metal was rusted, pitted, like it had been left to rot for decades, but there were scratches, deep, deliberate. They weren't old. I crouched closer, letting my flashlight scan the boards. My fingers traced the grooves. They were fresh. Whoever, or whatever, had been here was recent. That's when I heard it. A scream, low and ragged, echoing from somewhere deep underground. Not human, not entirely. My stomach clenched. I knelt on the dirt trying to catch my breath. My own heartbeat sounded too loud, too urgent. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what we tell ourselves in small towns when fear wants to sneak in. But the air around me thickened, like the forest itself was holding a secret. And then I heard it again, closer this time, a voice, faint, almost pleading. It called my name. I froze. Not because I recognized it, but because I didn't. There was no one else around for miles. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The sheriff in me wanted to run into the woods and find a logical explanation. But the man inside, the one who had walked too many cold roads and seen too many hollow eyes, stayed rooted. I shined the flashlight at the boards again, seeing them buckle slightly as if they were breathing. The locals never went near it at night for good reason. I'd heard stories, miners trapped in cave-ins, accidents that claimed lives and left names scratched into the walls, desperate messages no one ever read. Some claimed they could still hear the lost miners, whispering and screaming when the wind cut right. I'd laughed at the stories once. Now standing there, I wasn't so sure. I pulled the crowbar from the back of my truck. It felt heavier than I remembered, loaded with purpose. The first strike made a hollow clang, echoing down the shaft beyond the boards. Dust trembled in the air. The sound of splintering wood mixed with a low groan, like the mine itself was protesting. And then it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you certain something is watching. Step by step, I pushed the boards aside, my flashlight carving a path into darkness older than memory. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled like rust and wet stone. I inhaled sharply, feeling it fill my lungs. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back. I did anyway. My boots crunched against the gravel floor, uneven and slick. The walls of the mine were slick, too, etched with years of neglect and decay. And somewhere in the shadows, I thought I saw a shape. Just a blur, gone before my brain could pin it down. The rational part of me, no matter how small, told me it was a trick of the light. But there was something wrong about this darkness. It moved differently, swallowed sound, pressed closer. I called out, "Hello!" My voice cracked. It sounded small, weak, against the vast emptiness. And then came the response, not words, not language, but a sound. A scraping like fingernails on stone, followed by a whisper, too soft to understand. My stomach churned. Every fiber of me wanted to run, to escape the walls that seemed to bend around me. And yet I had to go further. The tunnel narrowed. Water dripped somewhere above me, plinking into unseen puddles. Shadows pooled in corners, refusing to settle. I caught movement, a flash at the edge of my vision. A figure? Or nothing at all? I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, the kind that comes from hearing local legends too long. But deep down, I knew better. I pressed on. My flashlight caught the remnants of old mining equipment. A rusted cart, half buried in debris, picks and shovels leaning against walls like silent sentinels. And then I saw it. A message carved into the rock, faint but deliberate. Leave. I traced the letters with my fingers. Someone, or something, had wanted me to know I wasn't welcome. I swallowed hard and forced myself to continue. The mine twisted, a labyrinth of forgotten tunnels, some ending in solid rock, others plunging deeper into blackness. I moved cautiously, listening to the whispers that now seemed to follow me, echoing through the walls. I couldn't tell if they were behind me or all around me. A sudden shift of air brushed my cheek. A sound, soft, dragging, like someone or something was moving in the dark. I spun, shining my light into the black, and caught the faint outline of a man, or maybe a shadow that wanted to be a man, standing just beyond reach. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart pounded, and a cold sweat ran down my spine. I knew then that the mine was not just abandoned. It remembered. It remembered the lives lost, the screams swallowed, the hope trapped in stone. And now, it was aware of me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had come to investigate, to keep the town safe, but every step forward felt like stepping into a living nightmare. The air thickened again, the shadows deepened, and I realized with a sinking certainty, I wasn't here to explore the mine. I was here because it wanted me to. A whisper curled through the tunnel, so close I felt it on my ear. My name. I froze, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. The sound of the mine itself shifted, groaning, creaking, as if the walls themselves were alive and breathing. And then, in the blackness ahead, I saw a faint glow, not light exactly, but something moving beneath the rock, pulsing. I couldn't tell if it was fire, reflection, or something else entirely. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices that I could almost understand, desperate and pleading. The air vibrated with them, filling my chest, pressing against my lungs. I swallowed, trying to force calm, and whispered to myself, I can handle this. I have to handle this. The mind seemed to hum in response, a low, resonant vibration that shook the dirt under my boots. I realized then that the mind did not forgive. It did not forget. And I was already a part of its memory, whether I liked it or not. I took one last look behind me. The boards I had pulled aside were barely visible now, swallowed by shadow. There was no turning back, not really. Not without leaving a piece of myself behind. I moved forward, deeper into the darkness, listening to the voices, the groans, the whispers of a mind that had waited for me all this time. And somewhere, in the silence between the echoes, I felt the first true stirrings of fear, the kind that doesn't leave when you wake up, the kind that follows you into the sunlit world, waiting for night to fall again. I didn't know what I would find in the tunnels beyond. I only knew one thing. The mine had called, and I had answered. The deeper I went, the more the mine seemed to swallow the world I knew. The darkness wasn't empty. It was alive with sound, whispers curling through the tunnels, sliding along the walls like smoke. At first, I thought it was just the echoes of my own movements, my flashlight scraping against rocks, my boots crunching on gravel. But then the voices came again, distinct and deliberate, murmuring words that I almost understood, as if the dead miners themselves were trying to tell me something. I stopped, straining to listen. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, weaving in and out of one another. They weren't yelling, not exactly. They were recounting. Names, dates, fragments of sentences, lost and half-remembered. I could almost hear the fear in their voices, the desperation, the confusion. We can't get out. Don't leave! Help us! I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry, tight. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it as acoustics, a trick of the tunnels. But the sheriff in me, the man who had spent years reading the truth beneath lies, knew better. These weren't accidents of sound. Someone, or something, was speaking. The passage narrowed, forcing me to duck beneath low-hanging beams. Water dripped steadily from above, each drop echoing like a tiny gunshot. The smell of damp stone and rust pressed in, thick and suffocating. I could feel the cold in my bones, a biting chill that didn't go away no matter how I moved. I shined my flashlight along the walls. There were markings everywhere, numbers scratched into rock, crude symbols, names, dates. Some were decades old, others fresher, carved deep and jagged. One caught my eye. Remember us. I traced it with my fingers, feeling the grooves rough against my skin. I didn't need to ask who it referred to. The air around me seemed to tighten, pulling my gaze into the darkness ahead. I pressed on. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the mine pressing down on me like a living thing. The whispers followed, swirling around me, slipping through cracks in the walls. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps behind me, light and uneven, as though someone or something was trying to mirror my pace. I spun, shining my light, but saw nothing. Only the black, stretching into corners I could barely imagine. Then came a laugh. Low, hollow, trembling with an emotion I couldn't name. It echoed through the tunnels, bouncing off the walls, lingering longer than it should have. My stomach dropped. It wasn't meant for humor. It was almost triumphant, like the mine itself was pleased I had entered. I forced myself to keep moving, flashlight trembling in my grip. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, one that smelled of wet stone and decay. I could see remnants of mining life, helmets caked in dirt, rusted pickaxes leaning against walls, carts abandoned mid-track. The shadows pooled here, thick and unnatural, moving as if stirred by an unseen wind. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of human voices, whispering, but not quite human in tone. They spoke my name over and over in fragments I couldn't piece together, like memories breaking apart before they reached me. I stepped forward, heart hammering, feeling drawn into the center of the chamber. There, etched into the wall, were more messages. Names, dates, desperate pleas. Help us. Trapped. Don't forget. Some were scratched in neat letters, others jagged, frantic, almost clawed out of the stone. I traced them with my fingers. The cold pressed into my skin and I could feel it. Not just the temperature, but the weight of all the lives that had been swallowed by this mine. A whisper brushed past my ear. I jumped, spinning, but no one was there. Only the shadows, curling against themselves, folding into the walls. The air trembled with sound. A chorus of voices rising and falling in a rhythm I could almost understand. They were not just echoes. They were memories, replaying themselves for anyone foolish enough to enter. I felt a sudden dizziness, like the walls themselves were closing in. I staggered, gripping the rough stone for balance. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming words I could almost comprehend. We lost. Trapped. Never leave. It was as if the miners, long dead, were trying to warn me, but the language was fractured, like memories half remembered in a dream. I took a deep breath, trying to force calm. I had to document this, to bring the truth back to the surface. But the mind didn't want documentation. It wanted acknowledgement, presence, fear. I felt eyes on me, though I couldn't see them, pressing from every angle, burning through the shadows. Then I saw movement. Not human, not quite. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, blurred and insubstantial. I blinked, and they were gone, leaving only the faintest trace of shadow clinging to the walls. My heart pounded. I realized I wasn't just hearing the past, I was seeing fragments of it. Glimpses of lives trapped in stone and dust, replaying endlessly. I followed a narrow passage leading deeper, the whispers intensifying with each step. Names, cries, fragments of conversations. Don't leave. Stay, help us. I could feel the desperation of each voice pressing into me, seeping into my chest. The air was thick, almost viscous, and I had to push through it, each step a battle against the weight of unseen hands. At the far end of the tunnel, I found a collapsed shaft. Wood and rock had fallen, sealing off part of the mine. The whispers were louder here, frantic, overlapping in a deafening chorus. I crouched beside the debris, listening. There was a rhythm to it now, a pattern in the chaos. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate, to reach me through the years, through the stone. I closed my eyes, letting the whispers wash over me. Faces formed in the darkness behind my eyelids. Miners with hollow eyes, hands clutching tools, frozen mid-motion. I could feel their fear, their longing, their despair. It wasn't just imagination. It was memory, trapped in the very walls of the mine, replaying endlessly. A sudden sound made me snap my eyes open, a clatter, like something falling. The shadows shifted. I thought I saw a figure, hunched and ragged, moving across the debris. I swung my flashlight, but the beam caught nothing. Only dust, swirling in a strange, unnatural pattern, like the air itself was alive. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, realizing I had been pulled too far into the mind's memory. The whispers were no longer distant. They were inside me, pressing against my skull, repeating names, dates, cries. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus. I had to survive this. I had to make it back to the surface, and then I heard it. A voice, distinct, closer than the rest. Turn back. Leave now. Not an echo, not memory. Something alive warning me. My pulse spiked. I had come to uncover the truth, to face the mind's history. But now I knew the mind was more than history. It was consciousness, awareness, and it was patient. I moved forward again, each step deliberate. The shadows seemed to stretch toward me, curling like smoke, reaching. Dust swirled unnaturally around my boots, clinging to my coat. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, judging. And the whispers. The whispers never stopped. I came to a small chamber, walls slick with moisture. In the center was a rusted cart, tipped over, as if abandoned in a rush. My flashlight caught something inside, a helmet dented and cracked. I lifted it, brushing off years of dust. Inside, I found a note, yellowed and crumbling. The words were scratched hurriedly. "The mind remembers. Don't be lost like us." My hands trembled. The note was old, decades old, yet it carried a weight that made my chest ache. I felt the presence of the miners around me, lingering in the shadows, in the stone, in the very air I breathed. They were everywhere. I realized the mine wasn't just a place. It was a memory, a grave, a warning. I pocketed the note, feeling its weight. I had to keep moving, had to reach the tunnels beyond. But every step was heavier than the last, the whispers clawing at my mind. I could almost see the miners' faces in the dark, their hollow eyes following me, pleading silently. I stumbled into another passage, narrower this time, forcing me to bend low. The whispers shifted, almost conversational now, like the dead were trying to communicate directly with me. "Don't stay. Trapped." The words repeated, urgent, insistent. I swallowed, forcing myself to keep going. And then I saw it. Something carved into the wall, deeper, more deliberate than anything else I had seen. A face, twisted in fear and pain, etched into the stone. Its eyes seemed to follow me, alive with the memory of terror. I shivered, feeling the weight of countless lives pressing against me, a chorus of lost souls trapped in their own past. I realized then that the mine was more than stone and wood. It was memory, consciousness, grief made solid. It had waited decades for someone to come, to witness, to acknowledge. And now that someone was me, I pressed on, knowing the tunnels ahead were longer, darker, more dangerous. The whispers followed, a constant presence, feeding the fear growing in my chest. I felt their desperation, their pleading, their unfulfilled lives. And somewhere deep inside, I understood the truth. The mine was not just haunted. It was alive, aware, and it remembered every soul it had ever claimed. I didn't know how far I had gone, how much deeper I would descend. But I knew one thing with certainty. Once you hear the echoes of the past in the forgotten mine, you can never unhear them. And the mine will never let you go. The mine had changed. Or maybe it had always been this way, and I was only now seeing its true face. The tunnels twisted unnaturally, the walls bending where they should have been straight. Shadows pooled in corners, thick and silent, curling like smoke and moving just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Dust hung heavy in the air, and it felt aware. I could feel it pressing against me, brushing my skin, crawling down my spine. I had gone deeper than I ever intended. The whispers had become voices, persistent, urgent, a chorus of the lost miners echoing through the walls. "Don't leave. Stay trapped." The words were layered, overlapping, like the mine was speaking through time itself. I tried to respond, but my own voice sounded small, fragile, swallowed by the weight of the darkness. Then it happened, a sudden crash behind me. A passage I had walked through moments ago had collapsed. Rocks tumbled, dust exploded in the air, and the sound echoed endlessly. I stumbled forward, coughing, waving my flashlight wildly, heart hammering. The mine had shifted, rearranged itself, and now there was no going back the way I came. Panic rose in my chest. I had to move, had to find another exit, but the tunnels were unfamiliar, impossible. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, flickering, reaching toward me. Dust swirled in shapes I couldn't comprehend, as if the air itself had life and intent. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, forcing one foot in front of the other. I followed a narrow passage, the walls slick with moisture, my boots slipping. Every step echoed through the tunnels, though not all sounds belonged to me. Somewhere just ahead, I thought I heard footsteps, not mine, heavier, deliberate. I swung my flashlight into the darkness, catching nothing. Only the swirling shadows, curling and writhing, always just out of reach. The whispers intensified, overlapping with groans and sighs, voices of miners long dead. Some spoke my name, others begged, others cursed. I tried to focus, tried to push through, but every word pressed into my chest, filling me with dread. I realized the mind remembered everything. Every life lost, every scream swallowed, every moment of fear replaying endlessly. And now it remembered me. A sudden shape moved at the edge of my vision. I blinked and it was gone. But the air shifted, carrying a cold brush against my cheek, like the touch of a hand that didn't exist. I shivered, forcing myself forward. I didn't know how much further I could go, how much longer I could endure the pressure of unseen eyes, the weight of countless memories pressing on me. Then I saw it, a narrow shaft, partially collapsed but leading upward. My only chance. I scrambled toward it, feeling rocks shift under my hands, dust choking me. Shadows flickered in the corners of the tunnel, moving with purpose, guiding me, herding me. I realized with a sinking certainty, the mine wanted me to leave, but only on its terms. I pushed against the debris, sweat and grime coating my hands. Every piece of rock felt heavier than it should, every motion resisted. The whispers rose to a crescendo, overlapping with the sound of shifting stone. Don't leave. Stay trapped. I forced my body upward, scraping, clawing, fighting against the mine itself. And then, a moment of clarity, a hollow, jagged tunnel just wide enough to crawl through. I slipped inside, dragging myself over rocks and broken wood. Dust filled my lungs, but I didn't stop. My flashlight flickered, shadows leaping wildly across the walls, forming shapes that resembled miners reaching, twisted in fear and despair. I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. I emerged into a small chamber, one I hadn't seen before. Here the air was still, almost peaceful compared to the chaos behind me. But the mine wasn't done. The shadows moved independently, curling around me, forming figures I couldn't fully comprehend. Dust rose like mist, following me, brushing my arms, wrapping around my legs. I could feel the presence of the mine everywhere, pressing against my mind. A whisper drifted close, soft, almost intimate. "You can't leave." I froze, gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. My chest burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I had no choice. I moved forward, crawling through a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber. The shadows gathered here, thicker, darker, curling toward me like smoke given form. I ran. Not with thought, not with logic, just pure instinct. Boots slipping, hands scraping against wet stone, dust choking my lungs. The mind shifted with me, passages twisting, walls bending, shadows stretching. I could hear the whispers grow louder, overlapping, pressing into my skull. Faces flickered in the dust. Miners twisted and hollow-eyed, reaching, pleading. Then the passage narrowed sharply. Rocks fell around me, the sound deafening. My flashlight caught something moving at the edge of the beam, a figure hunched and pale, reaching out. I stumbled backward, almost losing balance. It vanished, leaving only the swirling dust and whispers echoing in my ears. I forced myself onward, each step more desperate than the last. The mine groaned and shivered around me, walls trembling, dust swirling violently. Shadows twisted, forming shapes that defied logic. My heart pounded in my chest, my throat raw from screaming my own name into the emptiness. And then I saw it, the exit. A faint glow, just ahead, spilling through a collapsed wall. Relief surged through me, and I lunged forward, slipping over rocks, hands clawing at debris. The shadows seemed to pulse, curling around my feet, reaching, but not stopping me. I squeezed through the opening, feeling the sharp edges of stone scrape my arms. Dust exploded into the air, swirling like a storm, but I didn't stop. My lungs burned, my chest heaved, and I felt the eyes of countless miners pressing into me from the darkness behind. I stumbled into the light. Outside, the night was still. The stars hung cold and distant, and the wind whispered through the trees. I collapsed on the dirt, coughing, gasping, trembling. The mine loomed behind me, silent, but I could feel its presence, patient and eternal, watching, remembering. I thought I was safe. I thought I had escaped. But even as I staggered back toward my truck, I could feel it in my bones. The mine had marked me. The shadows, the dust, the whispers, they weren't gone. They had followed me, lingering just beyond perception, waiting for night to fall again. I drove away slowly, headlights cutting through the darkness, but I didn't look back. Not yet. Not until I could prepare myself for what I had seen. The mine was alive. It remembered. And now, so did I. Even now, days later, I hear the whispers when I close my eyes. Soft, low, curling around the edges of my mind. I see shapes in the corner of my vision, moving just beyond recognition. I know they are not hallucinations. I know they are memories, fragments of lives trapped in stone, reaching out. And I know deep down that the mine is patient. It waits. It remembers. And one day, it will call again. I survived the mine. I escaped its walls, its darkness, its whispers. But I will never leave it behind. It is part of me now, as much as I am part of it. Every shadow, every dust swirl, every whispered plea follows me. A reminder that some places are alive, some memories never die, and some horrors are patient enough to wait for a lifetime. I do not return. I cannot return. The mine waits, and I am already lost forever. If only in small ways, in the corners of my mind, where whispers and shadows linger, ready to pull me back when I am least prepared. Rain had been falling all day, but tonight it came down like the sky itself had cracked open. I sat in my cruiser, the wipers scraping against the windshield, the headlights slicing through the darkness like knives. The storm made everything feel smaller, compressed, suffocating. Even the hills outside town seemed heavier, darker, as if they were pressing in on me. I'd spent 15 years in this county, but there was something about tonight that felt different. Unnatural. I drove slow, careful. The old road wound up into the hills, sharp turns that never looked the same in the rain. My radio crackled, with static, and I kept turning the dial, hoping for some faint signal, but there was nothing, just me and the storm. That's when I saw it. A light, flickering. Tiny at first, but unmistakable. It hovered up there on the ridge, bobbing like it was alive. At first I thought maybe some hiker or camper had lit a lantern, but it was wrong. The way it moved wasn't random. It seemed to float with purpose, like it knew I was watching. I slowed the cruiser, my knuckles white on the wheel. My heart was pounding, loud enough to feel it in my ears over the rain. I told myself it was just someone trying to scare me, or maybe a reflection, some trick of the lightning. But the light didn't go away. It moved again, descending slowly down the hill. Or maybe it was coming toward me. I couldn't tell. I parked on the side, engine idling, rain soaking through my jacket. The wind carried the smell of wet dirt and pine, sharp and heavy. I leaned my head out the window and squinted into the darkness. The light flickered, then disappeared behind the hill, only to reappear a little closer. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. The stories people told about this hill came to mind. Local legends, nothing I had ever paid much attention to. Lights in the hills, ghosts, warnings, people disappearing. Never real, I told myself. Not really. But the thought made my teeth ache from clenching so hard, I grabbed my flashlight from the cruiser and stepped out into the storm. The rain soaked my hair, stung my face, but I didn't care. I needed to see. I needed to know what it was. I climbed the muddy slope, boots slipping in the soft earth. The light danced just ahead, teasing me, urging me onward. Every step made, me feel smaller, more exposed, like the hill itself was alive, watching me. The wind carried whispers, or maybe it was just the rain hammering the trees, but I swear I thought I heard voices, low, urgent, almost pleading. Halfway up, I stopped. My flashlight caught something in the mud. Footprints. Bare footprints. Wet, deep, and disappearing into the grass toward the ridge. But there was no one there. No sound of steps, just the storm. The lantern appeared again, floating, flickering, impossibly steady despite the wind. I froze, my breath fogging in front of me. It felt like it was waiting for me, watching, guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go, but couldn't stop going. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice sounded swallowed by the rain. Nothing, just the light. I thought about going back to the cruiser, safe and dry, but curiosity clawed at me. Something about the way the light swayed. It wasn't just a lantern. It was a signal, a warning, or maybe both. I continued up. The hill steepened, the grass slick beneath my boots. My flashlight caught shadows between the trees, strange angles that shouldn't exist. I shook my head, rain in my eyes, adrenaline clouding my judgment. My own shadow loomed large on the hill, twisting in ways it shouldn't. Then it stopped. The lantern hovered in the air a few feet away. I swear I could feel its heat. Or maybe it was fear radiating off me and my mind was tricking me. The air thickened, heavy and wet, pressing against my chest. I wanted to run, to turn and leave, but something in me rooted me to the spot. The light flickered once, twice, and then I saw it. A figure, or at least the shape of one, standing behind the lantern. Tall, impossibly thin. No features I could make out, but I felt its gaze, sharp and knowing. The rain fell in sheets, drenching us both, and yet the figure remained untouched, almost untouchable. I blinked. When my eyes opened, it was gone. Just the lantern, bobbing gently, moving again. I called out, but my voice was weak, swallowed by the storm. I followed it. Every step felt heavier, like the hill itself resisted me. The lantern drifted just ahead, always out of reach, guiding me further into the dark heart of the ridge. My boots sank into the mud. My flashlight flickered. And then, suddenly, I realized I didn't recognize the ground. The trees were familiar but wrong, twisted in ways memory shouldn't allow. I paused, breathing hard. My hands shook. My mind screamed at me to turn back, but the lantern waited. And something deep inside, some stupid, stubborn part of me, demanded I go on. A flash of lightning illuminated the hill. For a moment I saw the figure again, standing just beyond the lantern, watching, not moving toward me, not away, just observing, and then it vanished. I stopped, my chest tight. The lantern hovered alone, flickering. It seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run down the hill and back to the safety of my cruiser. But I couldn't. And then I saw it, a path in the mud, almost hidden by the grass. Not natural, too deliberate, as if someone or something had walked it recently. The footprints led up the ridge toward the peak, toward the lantern, but the mud was empty of shoes, empty of tracks beyond that. Whoever, or whatever, was here didn't belong to this world. A chill crawled up my spine. I felt the storm differently now. Not just rain, not just wind, but eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. The lantern flickered again, closer this time, as if coaxing me onward. I took another step. My boots slipped, mud clinging to my legs. Rain pounded my back. And then the lantern wavered, just slightly, and I swear I saw movement inside it. Shapes, fleeting, human, but not. Faces screaming silently, eyes wide and wet with fear. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. My flashlight fell, casting a cone of light into the darkness. For a moment, Everything was revealed. The twisted trees, the slick mud, the path leading nowhere. And then it all went black again. I scrambled to my feet. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if I wanted to follow or flee. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The lantern wasn't leading me somewhere safe. It was leading me somewhere I didn't want to go, somewhere I might never return from. The wind howled, and the rain fell harder. The lantern bobbed up the hill, slow, deliberate. My body moved against my will, following, drawn by some force I couldn't explain. Every step was heavier than the last. Every breath stung with cold and fear. Lightning cracked overhead, and for a single, shining second, I saw the ridge clearly. The hill stretched impossibly high, the lantern hovering just at the peak. And behind it, nothing. No figure this time. Just the hill, black and silent. I swallowed hard. My hands were numb. My chest ached. And yet I moved forward. One step, then another. Following a light that shouldn't exist, guided by something I didn't understand. By the time I reached the top, the storm was a roar in my ears. My clothes clung to me, drenched. The lantern hovered a few feet away, flickering gently, a heartbeat in the dark. I stepped closer, and then it vanished. No light, no figure. Just the storm, the mud, and me, alone. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But the footprints were still there, bare, wet, leading up the ridge and disappearing at the top. I didn't know what I had followed. I didn't know why I felt compelled to chase it, and I didn't know if I would ever see it again. But I knew one thing. The hill had chosen to show me something tonight. Something that would stay with me forever. And somewhere deep in the storm, the lantern waited. The rain didn't stop that night. It fell in sheets so thick I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I drove back through the winding roads, headlights cutting through the gray blur, my mind replaying the hill, the lantern, the footprints, the figure. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been watching me, not just observing, but waiting, patiently, deliberately. I told myself it was over, that I had seen nothing more than a trick of light and exhaustion. My cruiser splashed through puddles, wipers scraping rhythmically, and for a while, I almost believed it. Almost. Then I saw them. Figures. Shadowy, distant, standing along the side of the road. At first I thought they were trees, twisted shapes in the rain. But no, these were upright, human-shaped, barely moving, and impossibly still. I squinted, focusing through the water-streaked windshield, but when I blinked, they were gone. My heart thudded so loudly I was afraid I'd hear it over the rain. I slowed the cruiser, scanning the roadside. Nothing. Just rain, just trees, just the gray night. I told myself it was my imagination. The storm, the lantern, the exhaustion, they were playing tricks on me. But then I saw them again. This time, closer. Figures standing in the middle of the field by the roadside. Tall, thin, indistinct. Their features were blurred, as if I were looking through fog. They didn't move like people. They didn't breathe like people. They simply were. I stopped the cruiser, heart hammering. The rain pounded the roof like nails. The figures shifted slightly and my skin crawled. It was like they knew I was watching, like they had been waiting. I grabbed my flashlight. Stepping out of the cruiser, the wet air hit me like a wall. My boots sank into the mud, each step slow and deliberate. I swept the flashlight across the field. The figures there, just ahead, just beyond reach, vanished. A shiver ran down my spine. I muttered under my breath. "Where the hell did you go?" My voice sounded tiny, pathetic against the storm. I took another step. And then I saw them again, further down the field. They seemed to appear and disappear at random, but each time closer. Always just beyond my reach. It was as if the hill itself was rearranging reality, planting these figures for me to see, to chase, to fear. I called out. "Who's there?" My voice was swallowed by the rain. No answer. Just the distant flicker of shadows, almost human, almost alive. I ran, not fast but desperate. Slipping in the mud, hands clawing at grass and soil, I followed the movement, my flashlight swinging wildly. The figures scattered whenever I neared them, melting into the rain-soaked night like smoke. And then I stumbled. My flashlight skidded across the ground and went out. Darkness swallowed me completely. My own breathing sounded loud, ragged, echoing in the storm. I squinted through the rain, trying to make out shapes. And that's when I felt it. Eyes. Watching. Not just the figures, the feeling of being observed. Everywhere, from the field, from the trees, from the wet darkness itself. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising beneath my soaked jacket. I fumbled with the flashlight, clicking it on again. The beam illuminated the field. Nothing. Just rain, grass, the blur of night. But when I looked up, they were back. Figures no longer distant, standing at the edges of the field, at the base of the hill, along the tree line. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. They didn't move, didn't breathe. They just waited, watching me. I wanted to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. My mind raced. Who were they? Were they connected to the lantern? To the hill? Or were they just hallucinations? The storm bending reality, bending my mind? One figure stepped forward, or at least I thought it did. It was hard to tell in the rain, as if reality was smudged. I blinked and it vanished. Another figure appeared in its place, just a shadow against the rain. I took a step back. The mud swallowed my boots. Every step felt wrong, like I was sinking into something unseen. The figures followed, always keeping distance, never approaching too close, never leaving. I realized I was circling, drawn by some invisible current, herding myself toward the hill, the same hill where I'd seen the lantern. The storm roared around me, wind whipping my hair into my eyes. I could barely see, yet every step, every movement of the shadows felt intentional, like they were guiding me, testing me, playing some cruel game. I stopped and leaned on a tree, chest heaving. Rain streaked my face. My hands shook. I didn't know if I wanted to follow or run. And then I saw movement at the crest of the hill. A single shadow, smaller, flickering. Was it a person? A trick of the light? My heart jumped. I started climbing. Boots slipping, rain soaking through everything. The closer I got, the more figures appeared just at the edges of my vision, vanishing when I tried to look directly. At one point, I thought I saw a face, pale, almost glowing in the dark, watching me from the trees. But when I blinked, nothing. Just rain, just branches, just the slope of the hill. I paused, leaning against a slick rock, chest heaving, trying to gather my thoughts. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Not mine, not the rain. Heavy, deliberate, moving in the mud behind me. I spun around, nothing. Just rain, just the shadows. The hill seemed alive. Every tree, every branch, every puddle. It felt as if it had memory, as if it knew I had been here before. The lantern, the footprints, everything from the night before pressed against me, thick and suffocating. I climbed higher. The figures appeared again, flitting in and out of the storm. Always watching, always just out of reach. And I realized they weren't human. Not really. Their shapes, their movements. Something about them was wrong. Like someone had tried to imitate life but failed. I shouted, my voice lost in the wind. Show yourself! The storm answered with a gust that nearly knocked me down. The figures shimmered, almost like water on a hot road, then vanished. I thought about running, but the path downward disappeared into darkness and mud. The hill had changed, or maybe I had changed. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet I felt drawn upward, compelled by some force I didn't understand. And then I saw them one last time. A cluster of figures, closer than ever, standing in the rain like sentinels. Their faces, or the suggestion of faces, turned toward me. I couldn't make out eyes or mouths, but I felt their stare deep in my bones. The wet earth beneath them was disturbed. Impressions like footprints, but too faint, too shallow to be real. I froze. Rain sluiced down my neck, soaking my shirt. My boots clung to mud. And then, they vanished, all at once. Just gone, leaving me alone on the slope. But something remained. The feeling of being followed. The weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. The hill itself seemed to breathe, exhaling the storm in sharp gusts that made my teeth chatter. I stumbled to the crest, rain blinding me. And there, just beyond the trees, I caught a glimpse. A shadow moving, not fast, not deliberately, but sliding along the ground. I blinked. Nothing. But the memory of it stayed, etched in my mind. I turned back, realizing I had climbed higher than I intended. The field below was a gray blur of rain and shadows. And the figures, they weren't moving anymore. They had vanished. But I knew they were still there, waiting, watching. I didn't stop climbing until I reached the old stone marker at the top, the one that overlooked the valley. My chest heaved, my legs burned, and my hands were raw from slipping in the mud. I looked out over the rain-soaked valley. Nothing. No lantern. No figures. Just the storm, the wind, the dark slope of the hill, and yet I knew they were still there. The hill had memory. The storm had memory. And I had felt it all. Watched, guided, haunted. I sank to my knees, exhausted, rain running down my face. I tried to think rationally. Hallucinations, fatigue, fear, storm. Everything I had learned as a sheriff in this town told me to dismiss it. But I couldn't. Something about the way the figures appeared, vanished, and reappeared. It wasn't normal. I stayed there, knees in mud, rain pelting me, listening for the whispers I thought I heard the night before. And maybe I did. Low, urgent, pleading. Or maybe it was the wind, shaped by my mind into voices I wanted to hear. I didn't move until the storm began to ease, the rain tapering to a drizzle. The figures never reappeared, but I knew they weren't gone. They were part of the hill, part of the night, part of something I couldn't name, something patient, something cruel, something that waited for me to return. I left before dawn, boots soaked, clothes clinging to me, heart still hammering. The hill disappeared behind me, black and silent. The figures vanished, but their presence lingered, like shadows burned into my mind. And in the quiet moments, when the rain slowed and the wind calmed, I swore I could still see them, moving at the edges of my vision, waiting, just out of reach. The hill had shown me something that night, something I couldn't understand. Something I couldn't escape. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it was patient, and it would wait. I returned the next day, though I told myself I wouldn't. My cruiser cut through the early morning mist, headlights dim against the gray sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world wet and silent, the kind of silence that feels alive. I wanted proof that what I had seen wasn't just fatigue, imagination, or fear. The hill loomed ahead, familiar yet wrong, softer in the light of day but somehow heavier, watching. The path I had stumbled up the night before was slick with mud but otherwise untouched. No lantern, no shadows, no whispers, nothing. I stepped out of the cruiser, boots sinking into the soggy earth. My breath steamed in the cold morning air. I scanned the ridge. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, glinting off wet leaves and grass. It looked ordinary and deadly in its quietness. I climbed slowly, senses alert. Every step seemed louder than it should be, echoing through the empty hillside. I reached the crest. The stone marker stood where it always had. I ran my hand along its wet surface, feeling the rough, cold stone beneath my fingers. Nothing else. But then I noticed them. Footprints, bare, wet, leading up the slope and stopping abruptly near the ridge. My heart skipped. They weren't mine! I knew that immediately. I had worn boots, not bare feet. Whoever or whatever had been here had left them. And yet, no figure, no sign of life, nothing disturbed the grass beyond the prints. I knelt to examine them. The mud clung to my fingers. Deep impressions, but strange, too perfect, too deliberate. They didn't meander. They didn't hesitate. They started at the base of the hill and ended here, at the top, where the lantern had hovered the night before. My stomach turned. I felt watched. Not by figures I could see, but by the hill itself, or something that lived inside it. Every memory of the lantern, the figures, the storm pressed against me, heavy as stone. My pulse thundered. I stood trying to shake the fear. Rational thought. Sheriff's training. It was all I had. I took a deep breath and surveyed the ridge. Sunlight glinted off something near the top. I squinted. At first I thought it was a rock. Then I realized it wasn't, a lantern. Old, rusted, sitting on a tree stump, completely untouched by the rain. Not lit, but the moment I saw it, my stomach sank. The memory of its flickering light, guiding, warning, haunting, rushed back in a wave that made me shiver. I reached for it, hesitant, hand trembling. The metal was cold, wet. I lifted it, empty. Nothing inside but shadow. I set it down again, stepping back. My eyes scanned the field beyond the ridge, half expecting the figures to appear, to emerge from the mist. But nothing stirred. I walked the ridge slowly, scanning the earth. Every puddle reflected the gray sky. Every branch dripped wet. Nothing. Yet the footprints kept pulling at me, insisting that something had been here. Recently. Somehow. I tried to follow them, but they stopped abruptly at the crest. No continuation, no descent. As if whatever had walked here had vanished into the air itself. My stomach nodded. I took a deep breath and walked toward the edge of the hill, peering down into the valley. Mist swirled along the lower slopes. I could almost believe the night had never happened. Almost. And then I noticed it. Subtle, faint. A disturbance in the mud near the tree line. Footprints, fresh, bare, leading away from the ridge toward the forest. My heart raced. They weren't deep, just enough to catch the eye. The pattern was deliberate, careful, slow. As if someone or something wanted me to see, to follow. I wanted to run. My legs shook. My chest ached. But curiosity, stubborn and foolish, drove me forward. I followed the faint prints into the thin forest, mud squelching beneath my boots. The air smelled of wet leaves, pine, and something sharper, like iron. My hands gripped my flashlight. I clicked it on. The beam caught the mist curling between the trees, shadows that moved just at the edges of my vision. I stopped. The footprints ended. Nothing. No lantern. No figures. No sign of life at all. Just the forest, wet and silent, and me. My pulse thundered in my ears. And yet, I felt them, eyes just beyond my perception, watching, waiting, the same weight I had felt on the ridge, in the storm, pressed down on me. Heavy, patient, relentless. I swallowed hard. My flashlight flickered. Shadows shifted. I blinked. The trees seemed taller, closer, leaning toward me. Breathing, or maybe my mind playing tricks. I shook my head. Focus. Rational thought. But the footprints, the hill, the lantern, they didn't lie. Something had been here. Something was still here. I took a step back. Mud squished underfoot, and that's when I heard it. A whisper. Soft, distant, almost imperceptible. Not words I could understand, just sound. Pleading, urgent, a vibration that seemed to come from the hill itself. My stomach churned. I froze. The air felt thick, wet, alive. I tried to rationalize. Wind, leaves brushing together. My imagination, my pulse rattling in my ears. But I knew the truth. Something had been here. Something had watched me, guided me, haunted me. The hill remembered. I climbed back to the crest. The stone marker glistened in the pale morning light. The lantern sat silently beside it. I looked at it again, half expecting it to flicker, to guide, to warn. But it remained still, cold, empty. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. My mind replayed every detail from the past 2 nights. The storm, the lantern, the figures, the footprints. Every step had been deliberate, every moment orchestrated. The hill was alive in some way I couldn't understand. It remembered and it waited. I couldn't stay. Not yet, not now. I left the ridge slowly, boots heavy in the mud. Every glance over my shoulder carried the fear that something might follow, something might watch, but the footprints were gone. The forest returned to its quiet normalcy, the hill to its eerie stillness. I reached my cruiser, heart still pounding, hands raw from the cold. I didn't look back again. The hill loomed silently behind me, dark and unyielding, and I knew that it had not forgotten. Driving back through the winding roads, the mist curling around the headlights, I realized something I had been avoiding. The lantern, the footprints, the figures, they were part of a rhythm, a pattern I couldn't yet comprehend. The hill remembered everyone who dared to climb it, every footstep, every heartbeat. And maybe one day, it would call me back. I tried to shake the thought, But the image of those bare footprints, fresh in the mud, haunted me. The way they ended at the crest, then disappeared. The way the hill seemed to breathe beneath the storm, beneath the silence. I told myself it was over. The storm had passed. The hill was just a hill. The lantern, just an old relic left behind. But deep down, I knew better. The hill remembered, and it waited, and I knew. I would never forget. It was just past midnight when the call came through. The line crackled and hissed before a voice broke through, tight and trembling, like it had been wrung through a sieve. "Please, you have to come. Something's wrong." I paused, thumb hovering over the radio, listening to the static that swallowed every other sound. The voice was unsteady, a whisper shaking under the weight of fear. I jotted down the address, tucked the notepad into my coat, and grabbed my flashlight. It wasn't far, just off the old county road, where the trees pressed close on either side, branches scraping against the windshield like fingers reaching for me. I drove slow, the headlights barely slicing through the fog that seemed to hang heavier than usual. I knew this road well. Everyone did. People didn't call the sheriff for nothing. They called when the wind carried something unnatural, when silence felt like it was closing in. By the time I reached the house, the air had a chill that didn't belong to the season. The porch light was off, though the door had been locked. Someone had been inside. I parked my cruiser on the shoulder and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots, louder than it should have been. I remember thinking, not for the first time, that quiet in this part of the county was dangerous. Silence isn't empty. It's full of waiting. The door didn't resist when I tried it. Just swung open, slow, like it had been left ajar for me. My flashlight's beam bounced off the walls, illuminating the small hallway. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. And yet, there was a sense that the house had been watching me arrive. I took a step in, the wooden floorboards moaning under my weight. "Hello?" My voice sounded foreign to me, swallowed by the space between the walls. No answer. The smell hit me then, a faint, sour tang that made my stomach twist. Like old wood soaked in something it shouldn't have held. I checked the rooms methodically, each one emptier than the last. The living room was dark, furniture draped in sheets that looked like pale ghosts. The kitchen counters had dust thick enough to write my name, and the sink held nothing but the shadow of water that had long since dried. No sign of the caller, no signs of life at all. I called out again, a little louder this time, feeling the emptiness respond with an oppressive weight. The house didn't echo. It swallowed the sound. I remember that distinctly. Normally, houses swallow sound with softness. This one, it was hungry. The upstairs beckoned with its quiet, the narrow stairs groaning under my steps. I remembered the stories old-timers told about houses holding on to memories, keeping pieces of those who had vanished. I shook my head. "Don't go there," I told myself. "Just find the person, check the house, call it in." I reached the hallway at the top and paused. The light from my flashlight caught something, movement maybe, or a trick of shadows. My heart kicked against my ribs like it wanted out. And then I heard it. A thump. Soft. Slow. From the far end of the hall. I froze. "Sheriff?" The voice came again, clearer this time, closer, but wrong. Not the voice on the call, but something stretched. The sound of someone crying or trying to. I took a step forward, the floorboards moaning beneath me, the walls seeming to lean in. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was closed. I remember the cold pressing against the wood when I touched the knob. It was a cold I couldn't place, like the frost that doesn't come from the outside, but from inside, seeping out from the house itself. My hand shook, but I pushed the door open. Nothing. Just a room, untouched. Bed made, curtains drawn, the faint smell of old linen. I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. And then the window. Fogged from the inside, streaked like fingerprints had been smeared across it. I leaned closer, shining my flashlight on the glass. Outside, nothing but the black outline of trees, the faint shimmer of my cruiser's headlights. The phone sat on the bedside table, ringing, silent, dead. The voice I had heard just moments ago wasn't here, not in the flesh. And yet, it lingered. In the hush between breaths, in the way the shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners. I swallowed hard, telling myself I was overthinking it.
People get scared.
People imagine things. That was all. I checked the rest of the upstairs. Bathrooms empty, closets bare. Not a sound but my own breathing and the faint hum of the night pressing against the walls. Downstairs, I found the living room the same. Sheeted furniture, cold air, and the unsettling quiet. I remembered the voice, soft, almost pleading. I called out again, hoping for a trace, anything, nothing. I stepped outside, the air hitting me like a wall. I could see my breath, white against the darkness, and the wind carried a faint whistle, like the sound of someone sighing far away. The house sat behind me, still, quiet, empty, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that it had been waiting. I sat in my cruiser, radio crackling, trying to reach dispatch. Unit 6 to dispatch, I'm at the location. No one's here. My voice sounded hollow even to me. Dispatch came back with static, then a calm, normal response. Copy that, 6. Any sign of the resident? No, nothing. I wanted to add more, to explain the weight pressing down on me, but there were no words, only the quiet that followed. The phone rang again. This time from my own cruiser. I froze, hands gripping the wheel. I didn't pick up. The static on the line seemed to swell, filling the car, curling around me like smoke. And then the whisper. Not over the phone, not from the house, but here, inside me. Don't leave! I started the engine. Tires crunched over gravel. My hands were slick, heart hammering like a drum inside my chest. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting movement, anything. But there was only the house, silent, waiting. Back on the road, headlights cutting through the fog, I tried to rationalize. Rural calls at midnight rarely end well, but they rarely start like this either. People leaving their doors unlocked, voices fading into the night, the strange, unnatural cold. Something was wrong. I didn't know what, and I couldn't tell if it was the house, the night, or something inside me that had been woken. By the time I got back to the station, the first hints of dawn were brushing the horizon. Pale light spilling over the hills, washing away shadows, and yet the images lingered. The fogged window, the empty room, the pleading voice that wasn't there. I couldn't shake it. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear the crackle of the line, the faint tremor in the voice, and the way the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone else to arrive. I keep the call log on my desk. Stare at it sometimes. The number no longer works. The address unlisted. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I know deep down that the silence out there, on that forgotten road, isn't empty. Not really. And I'm not sure I'll ever drive past it without hearing that voice again. I couldn't stop thinking about that house. The memory of it clung to me like cobwebs, sticky and faintly suffocating. Even in the sunlight, I could feel the cold pressing against my skin, hear the whisper of that voice sliding through the fog. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew that. And yet, something about the call gnawed at me, insisting I return. It was late afternoon when I drove back down the county road, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and pine. The sun was low, casting long shadows that slanted across the gravel. I parked where I had before, engine idling, heart already climbing in my chest. The house sat there like a forgotten sentinel, silent but not empty. I gripped the flashlight and the radio, double-checked the locks on my belt holster, and stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under my weight. It was familiar and yet different. Every step sounded sharper, echoing into the fog that seemed to have drifted back in, curling along the ground like smoke. The door was slightly open again. I didn't touch it this time. I just pushed, careful, and let it swing wide enough to enter. Inside, the darkness swallowed me. The house smelled the same, old wood, something sour and wet that made my stomach turn. My flashlight bounced along the walls, revealing sheets over furniture, a thick layer of dust that no one had disturbed. But the quiet, it had changed. It was no longer just silence. It was waiting, watching. I moved slowly, taking each step deliberately. The floorboards complained under my boots. Creak, pause, creak. A rhythm that matched my pulse. The sound stretched unnaturally, like the house was listening, counting my steps. I could almost imagine it grinning. In the living room, I found the sheets shifted, not entirely in place. Someone or something had been there. My throat went dry and I swallowed hard. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe a small animal. But deep down I knew. Houses don't move things by themselves. Not like this, I called out. My voice seemed small in the vast room. Is anyone here? No answer. Just the floor groaning in response. The doors were closed, all of them, except the one I had entered. And that made me uneasy. Every door I had checked before had been untouched. Now some had shifted, slightly ajar, slightly off-kilter, like a mouth about to speak. The stairs called to me. I wanted to ignore them, but curiosity, that dangerous companion, pushed me forward. Every step was a protest. The old wood whined beneath my weight, protesting my intrusion. Creak, creak, creak. The sound multiplied in my ears until it felt like hundreds of footsteps echoing all around me, moving in patterns I couldn't follow. I reached the hallway upstairs. The air felt thicker here, heavier. My flashlight swept across the walls, revealing peeling wallpaper and the faint outline of handprints. I stopped. The marks weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. Just there, watching me, following me. The bedroom at the end of the hall was the same one I had checked before. Curtains drawn, bed made, faint smell of linen, and yet it felt different, like it remembered me. I stepped inside and the floorboard groaned underfoot, sharp and loud. Then from the closet I heard it, a creak, slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was shifting behind the door. I froze, hand hovering near my holster. Hello? My voice shook more than I wanted. Nothing answered. Only the creak followed by silence, and then faintly a shuffle. Not running, not panic, just deliberate, slow, deliberate. My heart raced, hammering in my chest. I moved toward the closet, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The knob was cold, and I gripped it with trembling fingers. Slowly I turned. Inside, nothing, just clothes hanging untouched, dust thick on the floor. But the sound hadn't stopped. It was behind me. I spun around, flashlight sweeping. Empty, shadows, dust motes dancing in the beam like tiny spirits. Then the floorboard behind me groaned again. Creak. Longer this time, drawn out, like a breath. My skin prickled. I turned slowly, heart in my throat. Nothing. But the feeling, it pressed down on me. Heavy, like water filling my lungs. The house wasn't empty. It couldn't be. I moved down the hall, each door I passed groaning under its own weight. I swear the doors were moving on purpose. Not by the wind, not by gravity. The house was alive in a way I couldn't explain. Alive and aware. I reached another room, small, likely a guest bedroom. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run. But the pull was there. I had to see. I had to understand. I pushed the door. Creak. It echoed, sharp and accusing. My flashlight revealed nothing at first. Empty bed, empty dresser. And then the window, fogged from the inside. Handprints, tiny, smeared across the glass. I backed up slowly, chest tight. There were more than one. Small ones, maybe children's. But there were also others. Larger prints, overlapping, as if someone had pressed their face against the glass, watching, waiting. The air grew colder suddenly. I could see my breath. My flashlight flickered once, twice. The creaking floors answered my pause, louder now, echoing from below. I realized I hadn't been alone for some time. Something followed me, unseen, moving across the boards just out of reach of my light. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But I was trapped by curiosity, by the need to know what had happened here, why the call had come. The house demanded I understand, and I felt the walls close in. Each step I took back toward the stairs felt longer, heavier, as if the house itself was resisting me. The hallway seemed longer than before, distorted. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, twisting into shapes that weren't quite human. Faces, perhaps? I tried not to look directly because when I did, the shadows retreated just enough to unsettle me further. I remembered my father's warning. Some places remember. They keep pieces of people, and if you stay too long, they might keep you, too. The staircase loomed. Each step groaned under my weight. I could hear faint footsteps behind me now, quicker than mine, light and uneven, following the rhythm of my own heart. The air felt charged. Static like before a storm, only colder. My flashlight caught a fleeting glimpse of movement at the bottom of the stairs. A shadow darted behind a door, impossible to track, leaving only a sense of being watched. I reached the landing and paused, leaning against the railing. The house seemed to exhale. The creaking stopped for a heartbeat, and in that silence, I heard a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. Not the voice from the call, not human. Something else. Something ancient and patient. "Stay," it breathed. "Stay," I swallowed, mouth dry, hands trembling. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to leave, to drive away and never look back. But the other part, the part that had answered the call, pulled me forward, drawn down the stairs again. I didn't want to, but I had to. Each step groaned, as if the house resented my intrusion. Downstairs, the living room seemed to shift subtly, rearranged since my last visit. Sheets hung differently, the shadows pooling in new shapes. I could feel the floorboards beneath me softening in places, as if the house wanted me to stumble. I resisted. I always resisted. The kitchen was unchanged. Dust thick on the counters, the sink empty. But there was a smell now. Worse than before. Decay. Rot. Something dead. Long dead. Buried in the woodwork or the walls. I gagged slightly, stepping back, light trembling in my hand. The creaking followed, a soft, deliberate cadence that matched my heartbeat. I realized then that the house didn't just respond to me. It played with me, tested me. Every groan of the floor, every whisper of wind, every shifting shadow was deliberate. It wanted to see if I would break, and maybe it knew something I didn't yet. By the time I left, sunlight fading entirely, my body ached with tension. Every muscle tight, every nerve screaming. I didn't look back as I drove away. The house sat there silent again, pretending to be empty. But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. It would wait, and it would remember me. Even now, I can feel the creaking under my own feet, in old hallways, in unfamiliar houses. That rhythm, that soft, accusing moan of wood bending under weight, it haunts me, a reminder that some places never forget, that some floors remember the people who walk on them, and if you listen long enough, they speak. And I'm still listening. I thought the house had shown me everything it had to show. I was wrong. I kept driving past that road for days afterward, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all, the calls, the creaking floors, the shadows that moved just out of reach. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Faces, pressed against fogged windows, pale and still, staring out at me with empty eyes. They weren't alive. They weren't dead. But they existed, and I knew it because the memory refused to fade. I went back. I told myself it was just curiosity, a need to understand. But the road, quiet and narrow, seemed to stretch farther than I remembered. Trees leaned closer this time, branches clawing at my windshield like desperate hands. Fog thickened along the roadside. I slowed, gripping the wheel, every nerve alert. The house was waiting. I could feel it. By the time I reached the porch, the air was cold, unnaturally so. I didn't bother knocking. The door opened with the same slow swing as before. Inside, it was darker. Shadows pooled differently, stretching across the floorboards. Dust hung in the air, catching in my flashlight beam like floating spirits. I called out. My voice echoed, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. No answer, but something moved. Something watched. I felt it behind me, close enough to breathe on my neck, though when I spun, there was nothing. Only shadows. Only the whisper of my own heartbeat. Upstairs, I checked the hallway. The air felt thicker here, heavier. I could hear faint shuffles, tiny movements that didn't belong to me. The doors were closed, and yet I could sense the house was shifting. Not physically, no, something else. A presence waiting, watching, and then I saw it, a face, pressed against the fogged window at the end of the hall. Pale, almost translucent, with eyes that didn't blink. Not a child, not an adult, something in between, something wrong. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The face didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared, waiting. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart raced. The window was empty, cold glass reflecting my own terrified face back at me. I told myself I had imagined it. stress, exhaustion. Rural roads at night playing tricks. But I knew I hadn't. My mind didn't invent the sensation of being watched from so close, of seeing that shape pressed against the glass with a weight that made the floor beneath me feel hollow. I moved closer, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Nothing. Just a bedroom. Faint dust in the air and the window streaked with condensation. And then I saw more. Tiny handprints smeared across the glass, some high, some low, overlapping like a collage of unseen children. I pressed my palm to the cold window. Goosebumps rose on my arms, and then the faces multiplied. They weren't always at the same window, sometimes behind curtains, sometimes faint in mirrors, sometimes reflected in the shiny surface of the dresser. Just a glimpse. A pale cheek, a dark eye, a mouth that didn't move. Always watching. Always waiting, I called out, voice shaking. "Who's there?" My words bounced off walls that shouldn't have echoed so loudly. Nothing answered, not with a voice, not with a sound. Just the weight of eyes on me. Following, analyzing, judging. I moved from room to room, each window revealing another glimpse, another face. Sometimes they were children. Sometimes adults. Sometimes I couldn't tell. But all of them pressed close as if the glass could no longer hold them. And when I turned away, I felt them behind me, just out of sight, crawling along the edge of my vision. The living room window gave me the worst glimpse. I stepped up to it, flashlight trembling. The condensation revealed a pale face pressed from outside. Mouth open, frozen in a silent scream. Eyes black, hollow, unblinking. I stumbled back. Heart hammering. My breath came in short, ragged bursts, and then I saw another face behind it. And another, layered, overlapping, impossibly many. They didn't move, but I could feel them breathe. Cold air brushed against my skin, carrying a faint metallic tang like blood long forgotten. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over the floorboards, and I realized the house wasn't empty. Not ever. It couldn't be. I ran downstairs, heart racing, flashlight bouncing across the walls. Every room I passed had a window. Every window held a face, sometimes just a flicker. Sometimes a stare so direct it felt like it pierced my soul. I could hear faint whispers now. Not words, not sentences, just sounds. Soft, urgent, like someone trying to tell me something and failing. The creaking floors joined in. Not the ordinary groans of old wood. These were deliberate, slow, taunting. As if the house itself had learned to mimic life. Every step I took was answered by a groan, a squeak, a shift beneath my boots. And sometimes if I paused, I could hear them walking. Not running, not fleeing, just pacing, waiting. I reached the kitchen. The windows there were different. Larger, older, and framed in dark wood that had warped over time. I approached one and froze. The face pressed against the glass was familiar. The same shape I had seen on the first night. But wrong. It smiled, or tried to. The corners of the mouth stretched in ways that were impossible, grotesque. I stepped back. Heart in my throat. My flashlight flickered, and when the beam returned, the face was gone. I realized then that they weren't just outside. They were everywhere. The house had become a mirror, a prism, fracturing reality. Every reflective surface, every shadow, every smudge of condensation was a doorway for them. For the first time, I understood why the call had come. Why the person who called had sounded so terrified. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, hungry, and it collected what it could not hold, faces, lives, memories, and displayed them in windows, mirrors, anything that could show a reflection. I tried to leave. I swear I did. But the hallway stretched longer than I remembered. Each step toward the door felt heavier, as if gravity itself had thickened. Shadows moved ahead of me, just out of reach of my light. Faces flickered at the edges of my vision, taunting, teasing, pulling me back. The front door. I couldn't reach it. It seemed to recede, stretching farther away. I could hear the whispering again. Softer now, but insistent. "Stay," it breathed. "Watch," it commanded. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs felt rooted, trapped in invisible cords that pulled tighter with every heartbeat. And then, a face pressed against the glass of the front window. Pale, distorted, mouth opening, closing. soundless. Eyes that seemed to swallow light. I froze. The world tilted. My flashlight slipped from my hands, spinning across the floor, casting shadows that danced like they were alive. The faces multiplied, layering over each other, pressing closer. The whispering grew louder, though still no words. Just an insistent hum in my ears, vibrating through my skull. I remember falling to my knees, hands over my ears, trying to block it out, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But the weight of those eyes, the cold pressing through the walls, the way the house seemed to pulse around me, it was undeniable. Hours passed, I think, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning in that place. When I finally crawled toward the door, the faces didn't vanish. They followed me in reflection, in shadow, in the smallest glimpse from a window at the end of a hallway. I could feel them pressing against me, trying to reach inside, to drag me back. I made it outside eventually, collapsing on the porch steps. Sunlight was gone, replaced by fog that clung to my skin and chilled me to the bone. The house loomed silently behind me, waiting, watching, its windows empty again. For now, I didn't look back when I drove away. I didn't want to, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes following me, clinging to me, floating just beyond the edges of reality. And every time I pass a window in this house or any other, I can't help but glance, just a flicker, a hesitation, because I know the faces don't stay put. They don't forget. I can still see them, sometimes when I close my eyes. Not always, but enough to remind me. Pale faces pressed against glass, staring, waiting, watching. And I know deep down, the house isn't finished with me. It never will be. The house had been waiting for me. I could feel it in every step I took toward the basement door. I shouldn't have come back. I knew it the moment I pushed the flashlight into my coat pocket and gripped the railing. But the pull was there. Stronger than fear, stronger than reason. Curiosity, or maybe something worse, had rooted itself in my chest. The basement door was old, solid wood, stained dark and warped over the years. The knob was cold when I touched it, colder than anything outside or above. I hesitated. My gut screamed at me to leave, to run back upstairs, past the creaking floors, the shadows, the faces I had seen pressed against the windows. But my hand turned the knob anyway. It opened with a groan, slow and deliberate, as if the house itself was warning me. The smell hit me first, a thick, sour tang that made my stomach twist. Earth, mold, something rotting beneath the surface. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Stairs descended into blackness, damp and slick. I took a breath and stepped down, boots echoing on the wood. Creak, pause, creak. The air grew heavier with each step. Cold, oppressive, like the house was inhaling me, drawing me deeper. I could feel something watching from the shadows below. Not a face this time. Something larger. Something patient. Waiting. The basement opened into a low-ceilinged room, walls lined with shelves and old furniture covered in dust. I swept my flashlight across the space, revealing forgotten objects. Broken chairs, shattered glass, rusted tools. But one corner drew my attention. A small pile of papers, yellowed and brittle. I moved closer, hand shaking, and saw what they were. Journals, notes, letters. Evidence of someone who had lived here long ago. Someone who had left pieces of themselves behind. I knelt, sifting through the papers. Names, dates, accounts of a life twisted, ending in something unspoken but horrific. There were drawings, too. Crude sketches of faces, windows, figures pressed into glass, all familiar in their grotesque eeriness. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a house with a presence. This was a house that remembered every moment of horror it had ever witnessed. That collected pieces of lives like trophies. A sound made me freeze. Footsteps, not mine. Not upstairs. Something heavy moving slowly, circling the room. I turned my flashlight, sweeping over the shadows. Nothing, and yet I could feel it. A presence brushing against the edges of my vision, close enough to sense heat, to feel the press of air against my skin. The room shifted. Shadows pooled in corners, thickening, stretching like liquid. The light from my flashlight seemed weaker, swallowed by the darkness. I could hear whispers now. Faint at first, unintelligible. Then clearer, though still not words. Just murmurs, urgent, pleading, echoing off the walls. I backed toward the stairs. Something moved in the corner of the room. Quick, deliberate, almost human. I swung the flashlight, catching nothing, but I could feel it there. Following, watching, waiting. My hand grazed the wall, fingers tracing the cold, damp brick. And then I saw it. A trap door, smaller than the main basement entrance, hidden beneath a tattered rug. The edges were worn, scuffed from use long forgotten. My heartbeat accelerated. I shouldn't open it. I knew I shouldn't, and yet the house seemed to hum almost impatiently, as if it wanted me to. I knelt and lifted the door. Dust swirled in the air, a faint musty smell rising. Below was darkness so thick it felt solid. A staircase led down, narrower, steeper. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But the house whispered, soft and cold. Come. Step by step, I descended. The stairs groaned under my weight. Each creak echoed, joining the whispers, growing louder, more insistent. The air was damp, the walls slick with condensation. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice, casting shadows that moved independently, shifting just out of sync with the light. At the bottom, the basement expanded into a long, narrow chamber. The smell hit me full force. Rotting wood, earth, something metallic. Blood! I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising nausea. My flashlight illuminated the far wall, and that's when I saw it. A pile of bones, old, brittle, yellowed with age. Not all human, but some unmistakably were. Among them, remnants of clothing, scraps of fabric. The memory of the call, the faces in the windows, everything came crashing together. The house hadn't just been alive. It had been hungry, collecting, preserving pieces of people who had vanished, leaving them behind in silence. I stepped closer, feeling the air grow colder, heavier. The whispers intensified, voices overlapping now, a cacophony of fear and pleading. I recognized some of them. The same tone, the same tremble from the distress call that had brought me here. Something shifted behind me. A shadow. Faster this time, moving inhumanly quick, brushing the edge of my vision. I swung the flashlight. Nothing, but I could feel it. The air pressed against my skin, like icy fingers tracing my spine. I tried to leave. I really did, but the house wouldn't let me go. The shadows coalesced, forming shapes, fleeting faces in the dark. Watching. Waiting. Every step toward the stairs was met with resistance, as if the air itself had weight. My boots stuck to the floor, my muscles burned with effort. Then I saw the writing on the wall. Faint, carved into the wood, almost imperceptible. Names, dates, pleas, some scratched frantically, others carefully etched. "Do not leave," one read. "Stay with us," another pleaded. And then a line, deeper, longer, smeared with something dark. "He comes." I realized then that the house wasn't finished. Not with anyone. It collected, remembered, and demanded witness. And by coming here, by descending into the basement, I had become part of it. Part of its memory, its hunger. The flashlight flickered again. I saw movement in the corner, a shape, crouched low, impossibly still. Eyes glinting, pale, watching. I raised my gun, hands shaking, voice cracking. "Show yourself!" No response. Just the whispers, rising, overlapping, pressing against me from every side. I backed toward the stairs. The shape followed, gliding along the floor silently, unnaturally. My breaths came fast, shallow. I reached the first step. Another groan from the floorboards above. The basement seemed to expand, stretching, swallowing light. And then something grabbed my ankle, cold, strong, pulling me down. I stumbled, fell. My flashlight skittered across the floor, illuminating the shadows in frantic bursts. Faces. Hundreds of faces pressed into the walls, the ceiling, the floor, screaming silently. Eyes wide, mouths open, fingers clawing at me through the air itself. I scrambled to my feet, ripping the thing off my ankle. It hissed, a sound like metal scraping bone. I ran, heart hammering, up the stairs, up the main basement steps. The house groaned in protest, floors bending, shadows twisting to block me. I reached the landing and pushed through the basement door. Sunlight, or at least daylight, spilled into my eyes. I fell forward onto the main floor, chest heaving, limbs trembling. The house behind me seemed still, silent, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. In the floor beneath me, in the walls, in the shadows. It had remembered me. And it would not forget. I didn't stay to look back. I ran outside, up the steps, and into my cruiser. Engine roaring, tires crunching gravel. I didn't slow until I reached the main road. The county stretched out before me, open, quiet, and yet I could feel the weight pressing behind me. The house had followed, in memory, in whispers, in shadows that would haunt me long after. Even now, at home, I can feel it. The cold of the basement, the eyes watching, the whispers overlapping in the corners of my mind. Sometimes I see shapes out of the corner of my eye, shadows that move against the walls, flickers in reflective surfaces. And I know the house is patient. It waits, it remembers, and one day it will call me back. I have nightmares of the basement. The faces pressed into the walls, the cold hands reaching out of the dark. I wake up sweating, gasping, and I know I can never unsee what I saw. I can't leave it behind. It follows me. In my reflection, in my shadow, in the quiet moments when I think I'm alone, the house isn't just a place. It's a trap, a memory, a predator, and I am part of its story now. I thought leaving the house would be the end, that once I was back on the county roads, driving past the trees and the fog, the nightmare would stay behind. I was wrong. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the cruiser in the station parking lot, hands gripping the wheel, flashlight resting on the passenger seat. Every sound, the hum of the fluorescent lights, distant dogs barking, tires on gravel outside, made my nerves twitch. I could still feel it. The cold from the basement. The weight of those faces pressed into windows, the whispers threading through the walls. The radio on my dash crackled. Static, nothing more. I reached to adjust it, thinking a stray frequency had crossed over. But then I heard it. A voice. Soft, trembling, faint, like it had traveled across time and space just to reach me. I froze. It was the same voice from the distress call, the original one that had drawn me to that house. But it was different now. Altered, hollow, echoing through. The radio layered over the static, as if it were coming from inside my own head. Please, help! I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel tighter. The station lot felt smaller suddenly. Every shadow deepened. The radio crackled again, louder this time. The voice closer, more urgent. Don't! Leave! I tried to switch channels. Nothing. The voice persisted, threading through every frequency. It wasn't just a call for help anymore. It was a warning, a summons. I felt it in my bones. The house hadn't let me go. It was following me, and the radio had become its conduit. I started the engine, tires crunching gravel as I drove through the silent streets. Every time I slowed, the voice grew clearer, louder, layered with whispers that I couldn't decipher. Faces. The memory of faces pressed against windows flashed in my mind. Pale, staring, waiting. The radio echoed their presence, voices mingling, overlapping. A chorus of dread. I tried to convince myself it was fatigue, stress, maybe even a trick of the radio waves. But deep down, I knew better. Houses like that don't forget, and they don't forgive. The sound in my ear wasn't just a memory. It was alive, stalking me, following me home. By the time I reached my house, the voice was louder, insistent, filling the cabin of my cruiser. I stepped inside, careful not to drop the radio, and the whispers followed, curling around the walls, pressing into my ears. The living room was quiet, empty, safe, maybe. But the static persisted, and then the voice. Clear now, right beside me. Come back! My pulse hit my throat, my hands shook. I wanted to throw the radio across the room, smash it into pieces, end it. But the voice wasn't in the device anymore. It was inside me, inside the walls, inside the air, and then I understood. The house had never been just a place. It had been a memory, a predator, and the radio was its teeth, gnawing, seeking, pulling me back. I fled, drove again, back into the dark county roads, headlights cutting through fog, the radio screaming the same fractured pleas. Each turn, each bend, made me feel as though the house itself were stretching along the road, following, creeping up beside me. I couldn't escape. I realized that in some way it had already claimed me. The faces, the whispers, the basement, they had marked me. And now the echoes traveled with me. I stopped at the old bridge over the creek, breathing hard, flashlight trembling in my hands. The radio quieted slightly, but then the whispers returned, soft, insistent, urgent. I could hear the faint hum of movement, as if something invisible stalked the road behind me. I dared not look. I knew I would see the shadows, the impossible shapes, the faces that weren't there but were. My radio crackled again. Clear now, unmistakable. The voice. My name. I pressed the push-to-talk button. Voice shaking. Who is this? Static. Then, don't go! The sound of the words stretched into a scream, shrieking and hollow, like the walls of the house had followed me into my cruiser. I dropped the radio, bolted into the seat, and drove faster than I thought possible, heart hammering, knuckles white. The fog thickened, shadows dancing at the edges of the headlights. I felt eyes on me again, hundreds of them, pressed against, the unseen windows of that house peering from mirrors in the world that shouldn't exist. I drove until my hands ached, until the road curved into town, until the streetlights gave me some false sense of security. And still, the voice lingered, faint now, almost beneath the static, threaded into every sound around me. The hum of the engine, the wind against the glass, the distant howl of a dog. The house was not gone. It never would be. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the radio whispered. Every shadow stretched and shifted in ways that didn't belong. Faces pressed themselves into windows of my home, fleeting, and fleetingly horrifying, just as I had seen them in the house. Pale, unblinking, waiting. Always watching. I tried to turn off the radio, unplug it, smash it. It didn't matter. The sound was inside me now, embedded in the rhythm of my pulse. I realized with a sinking dread that leaving the house hadn't freed me. I had carried it with me, the house, the basement, the faces, the cries. They were no longer confined to that building. They had followed, and they were patient. The echoes in the radio weren't just cries. They were calls, summonses, warnings to anyone who might come after me. I could imagine another sheriff or a neighbor answering the phone late at night, hearing the same fractured pleas, feeling the same cold pressing against their skin. And I knew I would never warn them. I would never speak, because the house fed on fear, on silence, on memory. And if I spoke, if I told anyone, it would only hunger more. I sit now, the radio on my desk, the static filling the quiet room. I pretend it is normal, just interference. But sometimes, when the night is deep and still, I hear it. The faint tremble of that voice, carried through the waves, calling my name, whispering, pressing against me. And I remember the house, the basement, the faces in the windows, the floorboards that creaked like living things. I am not safe. I am not free. And I know deep down that I never will be, because the house remembers, and it follows. Even now, when the radio crackles, I stop what I'm doing. I listen, not because I want to, not because I have a choice, but because the voice, the cries, are mine now. And one day, I fear, they will lead me back. Back to the road, back to the porch, back to the basement, back to the house that waits, always waits.